Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Brian Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of western Georgia on this April 8th, 2025. Tonight, we explore the archetypes of the horror genre, particularly as it applies to the novelization of horror, with a brand new guest, Beth Castrodale, who I think you're going to find fascinating. We're going to talk about her book and the motivations and explorations behind horror tonight on Vestiges After Dark. Everybody, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. Once again, I am your host, Bishop Brian Willett, and I am very, very, very happy to be here with you tonight. More than you probably realize, because last week, there's been some really, really bad storms coming through the South in these recent times, and they seem to come through on Tuesdays. There was even one threatening a little while ago, but it doesn't look like it's going to interfere with us tonight. I think we are well on track for a very good show. We have a very solid internet connection. As I was telling everybody at Mass last week, it seems like when we had the technician come out to take a look at our internet, it looks like they've been working on this regional system, I guess the system that brings the internet to this entire area, and it shut the internet down twice. Now, we thought it was the storms, but maybe it's because they discovered that there was actually a problem at something more local to their own systems, not something that was a problem with the connection to this building. And it seems what it has done is been solid ever since. So we've had a really good connection, but even better news than that, as I mentioned, I think a couple shows ago, our power company is bringing fiber to this area. And what's really nice about this is that because it's the power company, it's going through the power line. So they don't have to run a $25,000 cable to this building, because it's already got the wire, right? So this is going to bring fiber 2 gigabytes up and down for $30 less than we're paying for this crappy internet that we've been using for the last 3 years now. So we're very excited about that. I think it's going to, when it comes, it's going to fix everything. And I just got an email, actually, as I was getting ready here to do tonight's show, it's saying to expect to hear from them soon. They're going to be hooking people up in our area very, very soon for those who want it, and we definitely want it. So this is going to be a very good, and it couldn't come any at a better time, because the retreat house is just about finished. We finished the painting on it. The stone walls that we want to put up, we've just decided that the cost and the work involved is just too prohibitive to the budget right now. So we decided to forego that for the time being, and then at some point in the future, as monies become more available for that kind of thing, something that we can invest into the retreat house to make the chapel what we originally intended it to be, then we'll just have that work done at that time, even if it shuts us down for a week or so. That's not going to be a big problem. It's just a little bit of a headache, but it'd be a bigger headache to spend money from the budget that the church really doesn't have to spend. So that's done. We had the painter come out yesterday, and it's all finished. And now all we have to do is set a date to bring everything over there that I am lending from my personal chapel, so that the retreat house chapel can be functional. We haven't gotten enough donations to cover all that yet, but as those donations hopefully come in, we can then slowly replace what's at the chapel with the stuff that I've loaned, and then bring that stuff back so that I can have my private chapel back. But it's a small little hiccup, I think, that makes it more functional. So the reason I say it's a good time for the internet, for this new internet service to come to this general area, is that the retreat house would be running off of that same internet too. Not the same internet, but the same company. And I did not want to sign up with Comcast, because you can get Comcast over there. You can't get it here. There's already a Comcast line to that building. There is probably a contract, I think, if I remember correctly, for 1 year. And Comcast was something like $160. No, it was like over $200 for a gigabyte. So I would have had to sign a contract at twice what we'll be paying for for this fiber connection with the power company. And now we don't have to worry about that, because I didn't want to be like, okay, now the retreat house is ready, but we still can't stream from it because there's no internet there yet. And I don't want to sign a contract. Now we got to wait for the power company hooked up. So it sounds like it's going to all come together. Finally, something works. And so we're very excited about all that. If you would like to donate to keep the show on the air, and to, of course, support this ministry, if you believe in what this ministry does, it's a very costly ministry. And now we're going to be able to help people in larger numbers than we ever could before. And have a place where they can come and receive the sacraments, which is really the most important thing. We haven't had that since the mission church years ago, right? Now we'll have that, and we can, have a base of operations for helping people. A place that you can all come, members of this church can come to visit and receive the sacraments as needed. And this will, be available as soon as we can get the chapel consecrated, once we get the stuff moved over. I expect maybe a few weeks, couple of weeks to do that. Holy Week's really what's slowing us down, which, just so you know, there's no Vestiges next week or the week after that, because Holy Week takes a lot out of us, and it takes priority over the show, and then we take a week off to kind of decompress from the demands of it. So hopefully, I would say by the third week, in 3 weeks from now, we should be probably ready to go over there, and hopefully the internet will be ready. If not, we'll try doing 5G on the cell phone and see how it works for the consecration mass. Hopefully it will go through. We'll see. All right, as a little test, just in case the internet's not quite ready. But I don't want to delay it over that. And I certainly don't want to sign a contract for twice the price if I can help it. All right, enough of that. Joining us tonight from all the way south, because she's not with us tonight, is Jamie Wolf. She is here, but not here, right? How you doing tonight, Jamie?
I'm here, but not in the chair.
That's right. Yeah. You're not in the chair. The chair's very lonely, but Heathcliff was happy because he was sitting over here earlier.
Yeah, Heathcliff has a problem with me sitting in his chair.
It's only his chair when you're here,
I know.
He doesn't really care about it when you're not going to be here, but when he sees me starting to work at the desk, that's when he's like, okay, I got to
hate relationship.
Definitely.
Yeah. Greetings from the West Point Lake area of Georgia.
Yes, definitely. Okay, great. Well, it's glad to have you with us, and also joining us from Australia, we have Father Chris Yates. How you doing tonight, Father?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for on your internet thing. Sometimes you have to wait for the rubber bands to snap that were holding the wheel on before they bring in the whole fix. So it sounds like that's what's going on.
I think that is what's going on. You know, like, I mean, it was weird. It was coincidental that it happened during, like, right after the storms. Then all of a sudden, like, but the internet never went out during the storms, and it was fine after the storms. But all of a sudden, I, went to go do some work, and there's no internet. And so I looked at the app to see, what's the problem, and they had a message that came up that said that your I forget what they call them. It's basically this unit that sends the internet to the entire area, was being worked on. And that's the second time. And it happened right after they came out for this service call. I think there's been a problem in this area with AT&T for a while. They just didn't want to recognize it or just didn't notice it. And then when the tech finally came out.
Tipping point. That's reached a tipping point sometimes.
I think so.
And, I guess the days of, some people don't need the internet necessarily are over. So so they've had to grasp that nettle. But no, things are fine here. I mean, we've got a federal election coming up on the 3rd of May.
Okay.
And so the news is really boring at the moment. So, especially given that I'm sort of in the middle of it because I work for an independent MP. And last night the big debate between the leaders was on, and my boss was on a show on location just before it. And of course that meant that I could stay to watch the debate live. And somebody said, "Oh, are you going to stay and watch the debate?" I said, "No." And he said, "Oh, why not?" And I said, "Because I'd rather be at home with my wife."
I think I'd rather be dead, honestly, than watch one of these.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly,
I'm not nerding out. I'm not one that nerds out over leadership debates or any of that. I've only ever worked for independent MPs and senators, so it doesn't really float my boat watching the Uniparty pretend to argue with each other.
Yes, of course. Yeah, well, we're happy that you're here and not too bored out of your mind. Yeah, it's good. Good to have you. Good to have you. And also joining us in Tennessee, we have Brandon Milam, as always. How you doing tonight, Brandon?
I'm pretty good. A lot better now since I went ahead and took y'all's advice from last show, so not like last week or the week before that, and I have published my book.
Good.
Oh, wow.
I went ahead, got it done. Awesome. Decided that if I kept editing it, it was gonna take years.
Yeah, you got to.
You know what?
Just like any
blindfold, and
it's like any art form. Even oil painting, you'll just constantly keep working at it.
Done.
Eventually you have to just let it go. You do.
Just have to sign it. That's it.
Yeah. Eventually it just, you have to say this is it. But why don't you tell everybody where they can get it?
So currently it's only available on Apple Books. I'm trying to get it on Kindle, but that is a whole lot to work with because Kindle requires a completely different file format.
Yeah.
So I can't export it from Pages to Word because Word's not fully compatible with it. So it changes up the entire format of the whole book. So it's coming. It's going to take a bit.
I know all about that. That's why I have not self-published my book because I don't have the patience or the time. I really don't. So it just kind of sits there in a Word file on my hard drive, collecting dust probably. I don't know. I haven't looked at it in a while, but yeah, maybe one day I'll get around to it, but not yet. Not for a while. I can tell you that right now. Okay, so I know that. I guess I should say to everybody out there, thank you for joining us. Make sure that you like and subscribe and to this channel on YouTube, particularly. That's the important one. TikTok, for some reason, is still I received an email from the simulcaster that they are aware that there's a problem where some people were disconnected from their accounts on TikTok and not able to stream. They said they were working on it, but we never got any follow-up email. And here we are several weeks later, and I still can't stream on TikTok, which is unfortunate because that's really where our largest audience was for live. So what we're going to have to do is just wait, I guess. But we're streaming everywhere else. So we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and we'll have, of course, the audio only podcast version on Spreaker, and of course anywhere that you get your podcasts. About an hour or so after the show, it will be available, since that cannot be live anymore through Spreaker. Unfortunately, they took away the live service there, I guess because everybody does a video version now. Instagram's not working. I mean, it's working on my end. You guys are saying this. I mean, I'm seeing comments and stuff. Are you sure? I'm not seeing. It's showing that's working. There's people there. You might want to check on your end to see if
you're live.
I am. Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, you're live.
Yeah, Instagram's there. I guess refresh. It's local to you guys, or if you can't find it, just refresh. Yes, Brandon's book's The Devil's Advocate, a comprehensive guide to the history and evolution of the Satan archetype. So kind of in line with our show tonight. That's a pretty good time to release it, Brandon. I think it's you can talk to another author, and maybe you can brainstorm some ideas about the darkness. All right, let's get started with questions from the ether. What's our first question?
So the first question is, a quick Google search says Israel became a nation on May 14th, 1948. So what's going on with biblical references to Israel as a nation, such as Judges 2:20, Psalm 83:4, etc.? Or are these references to Israel not as a nation, but as a people group?
There's no distinction.
Yeah, there is a distinction, and the word nation there is very much specifically talking about the people, Israel. In a lot of ways, in the ancient mind, there wasn't a difference between the country and the people. They kind of were the same thing. But typically when it's referred to in this context, at least as far as the Jewish theology is concerned, it's referring to the people. From a Christian standpoint, though, the theology tends to recognize this as a manifestation of the church. So a lot of times when you read the more esoteric aspects of the Old Testament, it talks about the nation Israel. It's really seen in Christian theology as a foreshadowing for the church, or a precursor to what would become the church, because it is the instrument of salvation before it became the instrument of salvation. So that's what's really being referred to there. Not so much.
Yeah,
not talking about the political entity, and it's important because the political entity
I'm
is
not talking politics.
Yeah, because the secular nation is not what's being described in the Bible. Because I mean, first of all, Israel is a secular government. It is not the theocracy that existed in ancient times. Okay, in fact, that's one of the ultra orthodox Jewish complaints. They will protest the nation Israel because it is what they see as a godless nation. They don't like the fact that the Temple Mount is allowed under Israeli law to basically occupy the space where the Jewish temple should be. These are very interesting political problems out there. So, but no,
I was only gonna draw the connection between the Hebrew word that's used in the Old Testament, the kahal, that essentially, the ecclesia, which is used in Greek, is essentially a continuation. Well, Christians would say a continuation of this idea of the kahal, the called out, into those called out who are following Christ. So, in a sense, church and Israel are synonyms in the religion that becomes Christianity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So does that answer it for you, Brandon? I think that was your question.
That was a quick one.
Yeah, that was a quick one.
I must say, it does answer it, but because I think in earlier parts of the Old Testament, Israel isn't referred to as Israel, like in Isaiah 7. I don't remember exactly what Israel is referred to in that passage. Let me actually look it up because I knew it, but I was wondering when the change happened between uh, Ephraim. Is that Ephraim?
Ephraim.
Ephraim, yeah. So was that the earliest idea or notion of Israel?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about like the theocratic promised land and the the kingship of Israel in the kingdom, of Israel, in that sense, that should never be conflated with this modern thing we call Israel today. They're not the same thing. They're not the same concept at all. And so what you're seeing in the Old Testament is the development from this earlier idea. I mean, honestly, if you really want to get technical, the promised land is, again, the precursor to Israel, and then Israel becomes the precursor to the church from a Christian standpoint, obviously not from a Jewish one. But either way, regardless if you're looking at it from the strictly Jewish sense or if you're looking at it from strictly the Christian sense, neither one are reflections of the country Israel that exists right now. That is not
even
related.
in Isaiah 7, it begins by talking, excuse me, about the king of Judah.
Yeah.
So even within the Old Testament period when we're talking about Israel,
Yeah.
It's obviously identified with the people because we also have Judea, Samaria, which are geographical areas with their own politics, their own kingship. So it's pretty, which is why I was talking about the Kahal, because that's very much more the spiritual heart of what it means to be an Israelite.
Yeah.
And it's that which St. Paul is speaking into when he talks about God's chosen people coming from the line of Abraham. That's why he points out that Abraham was counted righteous before the law existed. In other words, Abraham was not a Jew when he was counted righteous. And then being grafted through Christ, who is the fulfillment of the Israelites, makes the church the new Israel. And look, this is a fundamental theological difference between many Protestant churches and Catholic Orthodox churches. I mean, the sort of Christian Zionist movement is I think based on a flawed theology. That's not to say that supporting Israel's flawed as a political entity today.
It's all part of that dispensationalism. It's just another feather in the cap for them to be able to justify their end times nonsense, along with the rapture. It's in the same category. But it has no bearing.
A Catholic would say, no, the church is the new Israel. Like, Israel is the church and the church is Israel. That's what Catholics would say. Orthodox would say the same, but with an added, the Jews became Christians, and whoever think they are Jews today are not.
They take it to another level. So there you go. Yeah, they're not the same thing. It's not referring to that at all. It's not a prophecy for the secular government. Believe me, it's not, because it's a true it's theocratic for one thing, but it's also a monarchy. And the other of which is Israel today. Very different. Two very, very different things.
So this next question, it's pretty interesting. Might take a little bit to answer.
Okay.
In the Bible, where it says, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can say to the mountain, move, and it will move. Is that true, considering myth is more real than reality, and considering that we have the creative power in us?
Well, I mean, as a Christian, I attest to the truth of Scripture. As a bishop, that is my obligation. I took a vow to that. And so, yes, everything in Scripture is true. And this is no different. Of course, though, what's being referred to here is a very kind of specific thing, not in the more general, literal sense that Jesus is talking. He's not saying that we have the power to well, just play wizard and just, whatever we command, the universe will just sort of give it to us. Although that's not terribly far from the truth, but that's a completely different matter that we would need to get into. Essentially, what's being referred to here, we can reference back to the parable of the mustard seed, which happens earlier, in where I think it's Matthew chapter 13, where it says, let me bring it up here. He proposed another parable to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field. It is indeed the least of all seeds, but when it has grown, it is greater than all the plants, and it becomes a tree, so much so that the birds of the air come and dwell in its branches. It's referring to faith that even the smallest amount of faith changes everything, changes your entire being, because that is the faith that leads to salvation, and salvation is what brings us to perfection. Okay, so it does what Jesus is actually referring to here is that we don't need to make any dramatic leaps and bounds in regards to that conviction. We just need to have it. We just need to be able to have it. And by doing so, we reach a point where we can align ourselves so perfectly to the will of God, because now that faith grows within us and changes us, and that our participation in it allows, we allow that to happen through our participation. Then at that point, anything can happen, because now we are so perfectly aligned to the will of God. We participate in creation at that divine level. But it's not saying that, you could command things that out of your own will to make happen. Nor is it talking about some kind of literal, magical incantation that, you just you use faith to get what you want. That's not what Jesus is referring to in that sense. And I think a lot of people do hold that view.
It's connected to two other images that he gives us. One is obviously the parable of the sower. So the idea is that the mustard seed of faith can become a great tree because it lands in the good soil. In other words, it lands in God.
Yeah.
And, God can perform wonders. For man, it's impossible. For God, all things are possible. So as hopeless as I am, if I have just a speck of faith in the true and living God, he can do great things through me. But it's not for my own sense of power or manipulation. It's for God's purposes. Because the other image that he gives us is, he says, if a wheat seed lives, it's just a single seed. But if it dies, then it can produce many more. And so the image is one of we have to be willing to die to ourselves. In other words, it's the opposite of us wanting to manipulate the world around us.
Yes.
We're dying to God's will being planted in his soil, and it's he that performs the wonders.
Yes.
And so and the temptation in life is Christ enters Jerusalem on the donkey, and the crowds are cheering for him. I mean, we remember what they do later in the week, but they're cheering for him. And the sort of the fallen human nature would have us be the donkey.
Yeah.
The donkey thinks the crowds are cheering for him, but they're not. They're cheering for Jesus, who is riding on the donkey, and we're the donkey. And as long as we recognize, if any great work is done by God in us, it's for his glory and not ours. And when we mistake his glory for our own, we cease to be able to do anything worthwhile.
I think we can also say that being a parable and having a lot of allegory associated with the parables that Jesus gives us, because, we're not talking about literally mustard seeds here. He's using it as an analogy for the kind of faith and what it's capable of doing. I think we can say the same thing about his use of the word mountain here, where he's talking about literally obstacles that get in the way of your salvation. You can literally move. You can command them to move out of your way, and they will through that faith.
I've always thought of it as a stumbling block.
Yes.
To keep you separated.
Right. He's not.
Mountain, but you can move that mountain if you nurture and grow your faith.
Right. He's not talking about an actual, physical mountain. That would be pointless, and God doesn't really indulge pointless pursuits like that.
Okay. Because, of course, growing up in the Protestant church, I don't remember if we got to that a whole lot, but when we would, of course, it would be taken literal, like all of Jesus's parables be taken literal rather than the underlying meaning.
So you can be manipulated, you see, because if you can't move mountains by your faith, then there's a failing in you. And so, we're going to tell you
catch 22.
It'll normally involve you giving us money and that sort of thing. So, I mean, by the way, there is something smaller than a mustard seed that can move mountains. It's if you split an atom. And so
there you go.
There you go. It could be something about, maybe he was talking about,
not
physics.
desirable.
Yeah. He's talking about quantum physics. You never know. I mean, I would think Jesus would have had some insight into it that we wouldn't.
That'll be on the next Ancient Aliens. We'll discuss that.
No, that's a good idea, though. You're right. I mean,
Secrets of the Bible.
You split an atom. I mean, you're basically unleashing Pandora's box on the universe. I mean, it just blows up. So well done. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to look at it, but the one way to not look at it is to take it literally as he's talking about a physical mountain that would literally get up and walk away because, your faith says so. That's not what he's saying. And that's really, when you think about it, completely missing the point in so many profound ways that it's somewhere between humorous and sad. You can't help but laugh at it, but then you want to cry and then you want to laugh again. It's because it misses the entirety of the message, and that's where the beauty is.
There's also, so I've just made this connection, which, I've spoken on the show before about the argument from contingency, of Thomas Aquinas. So, he's viewing the clouds forming and vanishing over the Apennine Mountains, and he posits that actually, if you could sit there for long enough, the mountains themselves would have formed and gone away. Through I mean, proto-science. Really, he's kind of the preeminent geologist. But in the sense that God is eternal and faith in Him is sure, steadfast, permanent. That faith will see mountains rise and fall.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
As well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it is. I mean, you could look at it that way too. The eternity of God. But yeah, he's not saying that, you get the power to do whatever you want.
Heaven forbid.
It's not a genie, I mean, it's not like you get 3 wishes and then your last wish is to just wish for unlimited wishes, I mean, it's not like that. But there you go. That's the best answer I can give you on that one.
And so our third one is more of a astrological question.
Okay.
In general terms, what's to be expected now that Neptune has entered Aries?
Okay, so this is one of those generational effects because Neptune is this very slow-moving planet in the zodiac as it goes through the zodiac. Because it's one of the furthest ones out there, right? So it has a larger orbit, takes a lot more time to go through the sky. And when you're looking at the zodiac, which is like basically, all of the 12 figures of the zodiac that go around almost as if it circles the earth, right? From the part that we can see above the horizon and then below us. So Where Father Chris he sees a different zodiac than what we see because he's getting the other side, but it's still there. And when you look at a chart, what you're looking at is basically the circle is the earth, and then you're looking at the sky around it. So as a chart is formed based upon where the planets are in relation to the sky, specific to your location on the earth. And then that becomes your chart, your natal chart, or if you're doing transits, it becomes the transit chart, whatever. So Neptune's very slow moving, and when it's entering Aries, it's going to be there for a while. There is some retrograde motion, I think, if I remember correctly, so it will come back out and then go back in again. Retrograde means it just looks like it's going the other way, but it's just a perception thing. It's not actually turning around and going another direction, then turns around and goes again, just the way it looks from the earth. And that's what matters for astrology, is how it looks. It's completely relative to the viewer on earth. So this configuration essentially, let's talk about what Neptune in Aries is. So Aries, from a zodiac point of view, is a fire sign. It's probably the most fiery of the fire signs. Very outgoing, very aggressive, very high energy is how I would put it. And it can be just extremely aggressive, high energy. Aryan people are high energy, sometimes high maintenance because of it. They can be very enthusiastic. Some on the more dynamic side of the zodiacal sign. These are the go-getters. These are the people that can get things done. These are people that are fun to be around. They're the life of the party. They seem to have unlimited energy to do things, and they got 1,000 things going on, and they're getting it all done. They're like that, and they're very extroverted people. Typically, they like being, watched, and they like being out there and being the center of attention. All that is what Aries is like. Now, on the static side, the darker side of the sign, they can be arrogant, obnoxious. They can be argumentative. They can be fickle. They're interested in you for a while, and then they move on. You bore them. They can get very easily bored. So that's Aries. So think high energy. Okay. Then when you put Neptune in Aries, then what that means is that Neptune becomes influenced by the energy of the sign it's in. So you have that high energy Aries, but then you have Neptune, and Neptune's kind of an unusual planet in the sense that it covers all of the incorporeal aspects of reality, predominantly spirituality and imagination. So when you put Aries, high energy, in combination with imagination and spirituality, what you get is a compounding effect where imagination grows, and it becomes right now a time where the world will undergo a dramatic stage of creativity. It'll be easier to draw from. That's one of the good things it can do. But at the same time, just like the zodiacal signs, there's dynamic and static properties, and Neptune has a lot of static properties as well. Neptune can suffer from delusions, and mental illness can actually manifest through the Neptune sign, or where Neptune happens to be in the houses. So you can look at that and see if there's an influence there. And so what I expect to see, again, you're going to have to ask, I think we have an astrologer on the next show. You can ask them. They might have a very different opinion of this than I do. But I'm not an astrologer, but I do look at these things from time to time. And I would say that in my understanding, what we're going to see is an increasing state of very radical delusional thinking. We've been under this influence already. As it approaches, it influences us. It's not surprising to me that the last few years, we've seen an increase in I would say the normalization of delusional thinking, particularly with identity. There was a time where, there still is. Gender dysphoria, for example, is a mental illness. It's still something that can be diagnosed, But we now have a society, over the last few years at least, trying to normalize this, okay? Basically saying that it's okay to not accept yourself for who you are. You got to accept, you know, if you're not happy with who you are, then you can go and become anyone else. And I don't think that's a healthy message. I'm not even talking about the political correctness of gender identity and sexual identity and all these other things that we worry so much about as a species, which I think gets rather silly after a while. I would argue, though, that even outside of where you stand in the political spectrum as to whether or not you think that this is okay or not, I would say that it's never healthy, ever, to reject reality, even if you don't like it, and B, to not accept yourself for who you are, even when you don't like who you are. You know, if you don't like who you are, make yourself better, but don't pretend you're someone else. And that's delusional thinking, which I think was definitely precipitated by the coming of this configuration with Neptune coming into Aries, because that's the kind of thing that it can do. So, you know, we're seeing it also in politics, you know, a lot of radical delusional thinking. Think about fake news, right? That's a big topic that came into play during the COVID era, which is, again, the precursor to this energy coming. And so, you know, you have people claiming that various things, you know, the ridiculousness of wearing masks everywhere, like that was going to save the planet. You know, and of course, all the fear response that came with that. This is all things that can be manufactured under Neptune. When you bring Aries into it, it just gets out of control, because Aries is such a multitasker. It can really get out there and do all sorts of radical things with that energy. And when you put Neptune there, honestly, the only thing that tempers Aries is Saturn. You know, that's the only thing that can. Otherwise, Aries just gets out of control, and Neptune doesn't put any boundaries in place because it doesn't want any boundaries itself. So they kind of just run with each other into the night and become this almost mad doctor-like experiment together, where anything can happen. And we've seen that in like I said, and we see it in the politics right now. We see it in the fake news stories and the yellow journalism that's now become normalized, just like gender identity, normalizing things that are not healthy. You know, this is very problematic, and it doesn't have to go that way. It could have gone dynamic, but we're not a real dynamic species right now. We're very much connected to the static side of things.
Oh, yeah.
So this becomes where you start to see the problematic parts, because, you know, we're not slaves to astrology. We're not slaves to the movement of the planets. These things just show us what the archetypes are that are present. And, you know, if we allow ourselves to be seduced by them, well, this is what results. If we actually grow a brain and use it, then you know what? We can tell it how it's going to go. It didn't have to go this way. It's just we want it to go this way. We love fear. Nothing makes. I mean, look, I'm my actual job. You know, if we're talking about jobs in terms of something that makes you money, you know, is basically investing. You know, and of course the predominant investment that I have made is in the family business, but I also do more conventional investing as well on the side. And if you're an investor, then you probably know what the markets have been like these last couple of weeks. It's been nightmarish, and none of this had to happen. You know, it's all fear-based emotionalism is what it is. It has nothing to do with the fundamentals of these companies. It has nothing to do with the actual money that's being circulated around. It's all based upon how people feel. And so when people are afraid, they pull money out.
Votes.
Yeah, well, it's true. It does. And
negativity wins votes. You know, I mean, what is the great Thomas Sowell quote? I think in his major book, he said, you know, the first rule of economics is scarcity. And the first rule of politics is to ignore the first rule of economics.
There you go.
Right.
It's true. It is true. And nowhere will you see delusional processes or delusional thinking than in politics. It's all lies.
But as
and
I
Neptune
say,
loves to lie.
we're in an election cycle now, and all we've got is fear.
Yeah.
All we've got is fear. Oh, if you vote for him, healthcare is going to be finished.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's garbage, of course. But,
of course, yeah.
You know, that's what works.
Well, I tell people about Trump.
Negative fear campaigns.
I told my students last week about Trump, and it's like, you know, I'm one of the few people I know. A few of my students feel the same way. I know Jamie does. We've talked about it. You know, I'm neutral on Trump. I don't really hate him. I don't really like him. He's not my cup of tea. But
I feel the same way. I feel exactly the same way.
Yeah, I mean, he's just
I'm a pragmatist.
I agree with some of the things he says. I disagree with a lot of the things he says. You know, it's like anybody else in the world. That's how I feel about anybody. I disagree with them on some things, and I agree with them on some things. The same thing with my wife.
Do you think that's because we're only a disciple of one person?
I mean, it could very well be, I think.
I think that makes a massive difference.
I think it does.
If
Maybe
you're
it does.
a disciple of Jesus Christ, you're not looking for a messiah in politics. You've already found
That's
him.
a very, very good, you know, that's a very good.
You're not going to find one.
No, you're not.
No.
But I mean, but my whole thing is that it's like, everybody agrees with some things and disagrees with some things. With everybody, that's normal. That's natural. Like I said, even with my own wife. I mean, if we all agreed on everything, I mean, that would be actually quite boring, wouldn't it? And we wouldn't.
It'd be very boring.
It would, and honestly, it would stifle the talents, the individual talents that each one of us brings to the relationship. Where she can do things that better than I can, and I can do things better than she can, and we can kind of balance out those weaknesses together. I mean, that's how this works. But with Donald Trump, I mean, I don't love him. I don't hate him, but what I see out there in the world are people who love him far too much and people who hate him far too much, and that's the problem. Mm-hmm. You know, stop. You know, be neutral. Be neutral in your approach and application of these ideas and these thoughts, but do not indulge in fantasies that are toxic. And bring them into reality. Be able to distinguish the difference, which is a very good question.
Or worshiping false idols.
Yes, because it is. Essentially, it is a false idol. It is.
I must say, how did you say it, Bishop? Walk the middle path?
Middle path. Well,
Yes.
it's not me. It's Buddha that said that one. But I just continue the message. It's a good message, and Jesus does it too. Jesus does it too. I mean, you know,
The good red road.
Yeah.
Native American.
Well, I mean, what I like about the story of Siddhartha, because it is so applicable to the extremes that we see today, what I love about Siddhartha is the idea that he tried extremes. He came from an extreme. He lived a life of absolute perfection, not knowing anything about disease and death, right? Didn't think that even happened because he was sheltered from it. And so when he finally realized that death is the inevitability of all things, then he took on almost a nihilistic approach, like thinking, well, then nothing matters. I'm just going to give myself over to asceticism and see if I can find some reason or purpose to all of this suffering. And that didn't work either. He nearly killed himself, not intentionally, just by virtue of starvation and not taking care of himself through his aesthetic, the aesthetic pursuits. And so he realized that's not going to work either. The only way to do it is to be practical and pragmatic, as Father Chris just said, to be able to approach things with a level head. It's pure logic. The beauty of Buddhism is that it is the most logical of all religions. It gives us, I would say, the most practical concept, because it's not a religion. It has religious components that people have attached to them because of, just like any other religion or any other belief system, it adopts, or the religious ideologies that exist in a particular region become adopted into it. But overall, it's a philosophy. It's not really a religion, and I think that's what makes it I think, more neutral and more accessible. Even in a secular context, the principles can be applied. Even in a Christian context, the principles can be applied. You don't need to get into the doctrines of it if you don't want to, like reincarnation. That's irrelevant. If you believe in reincarnation, great. If you don't, it doesn't prevent you from being able to utilize the teaching of Siddhartha any differently. So I think middle way is the way to go, particularly when it applies to politics. It's a lesson that this country could definitely learn to adopt, and they'd be happier if they did.
I think actually, from the outside looking in, you Americans are much more middle way than you think you are. I mean, you know, the way people argue and debate with each other might not be middle way, but you generally end up with a position where you have a president of one party and at least one of the other houses are not of that party. You know, I mean, I know at the moment technically the Republicans have got all three branches, but not really. Yeah, I think Americans are far more moderate than they think they are. There's my radical thing to say.
I mean, I don't.
We don't debate anymore.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. What I think was going on here, honestly, is bots. I really think the majority of the divisiveness is manipulation with social media bots.
I think you're right.
I really do.
Yeah,
I'm not so sure.
Back in time, it wasn't like that.
It was not
before bots were a thing.
That's right. Yeah,
you know, but whether it was Reagan or Clinton, you know, so on both sides there was goodwill. People are fundamentally patriotic and you know, support each other. I think you're probably right.
And, you know, I will tell you,
it's impossible to know how much that's infected things.
I will tell you that I don't know too many people today who would have the position where they like, oh, I'm voting for the Democrat this race because I like what they stand for better. But and then another race comes on, so I'm going with the Republican this time. That was normal 50 years ago. To be completely, all
Christians should be swing voters, by the way.
I mean, honestly, you know, right? I mean, people used to vote more for the person. Now they vote for the ideology because they're so obsessed with identity today. And the identity is all fabricated. This is the beautiful lesson of Buddhism as well, is how we build these artificial concepts for ourselves and they become our reality. And therefore, politics is not immune. In fact, it's the best expression of how it comes about. And so because we're so obsessed, we're very self-centered. It's really a type of egocentrism is what it is. We're so obsessed with identity and forging identity and building identity and creating ideologies to prove it. To prove that we exist, to prove that this ego exists, that, you know, we've completely been absorbed by it instead of seeing ourselves as observers and these are concepts to participate in a proportionate way, and that's how I remember having conversations with my grandfather, and my grandfather was born in. I think Tracy and I were looking at 1911, I think. I think it was 1911 my grandfather was born. And I remember having a lot of conversations with him when I was younger, and he was still alive, about politics. And, you know, he pretty much voted Democrat most of the time. This was Massachusetts. It's a very Democrat state, even back then. But he loved Nixon. He loved Nixon. He thought Nixon was a great president. You would never see that kind of thought today. It's all ideological.
You wouldn't see it,
now.
But it might still be there. You might not see it because, like you said,
well, they're not talking. Maybe I think what it
infected.
is. Well, I think what it is that the people that actually do have that they stay quiet because they don't want conflict. So maybe
they're offline as well.
They are offline.
They're offline.
Maybe like they need to get more
online.
Maybe they need to get noisier to shut up the irritating people. That might be the way to fix this. I don't know. But anyway, that's what Neptune and Aries as an astrological configuration is bringing to the table. So we're going to have at least a decade more of this. And I don't foresee it getting better because I don't see people
Buckle
taking.
up, Buttercup.
I know, right? I don't see people taking the dynamic side of Neptune and Aries. I see them taking more of the
hopefully
static side.
the positive outcome of this is that people will stop looking to politicians and sports stars to be their heroes. That would be a very, very good outcome.
But do you think that that's the direction we're going, though? I don't think so.
I don't know. I don't know. I think the cynicism towards politics and politicians might lead people towards
something else.
Looking for better value systems elsewhere.
I hope so, because they're not going to find if they're looking for saviors, you're not going to find in politics. I mean, you might find damnation there, but
loyalty.
Yeah.
to quote my favorite, one of my favorite footballers, Roy Keane, former captain of Manchester United. If you want loyalty, buy a dog.
Yeah, that was Gordon. Gordon Gekko said that on Wall Street too. It's true. It is true. Okay, so Brandon, I hope, does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, it's just a question.
Yeah, that's the question, right?
And loads of others he didn't want answers to.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's always going to be more.
That tends to be how we do things.
It is. It is.
We're going to give you your answer and our answer and everybody else's answer.
Yeah, everybody else's.
Make sure we cover all our bases.
We try. We try to be pragmatic and middle way here. I think we do a pretty good job of it. I think we're very practical. Yeah. We're very practical. Thank God for YouTube. It's almost a very libertarian concept when you think about it, that you can just get out there and have a show like this and not have to worry about the dynamic of what your network says, or what the CEO of your production company wants, what your advertisers wants. That's why I don't want advertisers here. I want to be able to say what I want to say. I want to say it the way I want to say it, and I don't want anyone telling me that I can't do that, or they're going to withdraw their sponsorship. Well, too bad. Now the church sponsors this show, and I control the church, so there's nothing that anyone can do about it. And that's the best way. That's the best show, honestly, because we don't have any kind of boundaries or restrictions in that regard. Anyway, we're going to take our first break here. When we come back here, we'll be talking with our brand new guest, Beth Castrodale, about her fascinating book and the horror genre, what led to this inspiration. Don't go away.
like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down. Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna let it rain. Tonight, we gonna let it rain. Tonight, we gonna let it rain. Just like the sunrise, we gonna let it rain. Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna let it rain. Tonight, we gonna let it rain. Tonight, we gonna let it rain. Just like the sunrise, we gonna let it rain.
Welcome back, everyone, to Vestiges After Dark. We're getting ready now to start tonight's topic on the horror genre and exploring this with author Beth Castrodale in her book, The Inhabitants. I think we're going to have a really good time talking about the various archetypes associated with this. I know a lot of you are interested in this, and paranormal, kind of goes hand in hand with it. So we got a great night ahead. Don't go away. Okay, everybody, get ready for this because I think, this is going to be a topic and a discovery, a moment of discovery like no other, because we have with us tonight brand new guest, Beth Castrodale, who is an award-winning novelist whose fascination with eerie storytelling began in childhood. She's the author of 4 novels, including her latest, The Inhabitants, which won the horror category at the 2024 Best Book Awards, sponsored by American Book Fest. Her second novel, In This Ground, earned recognition as a shortlist finalist for the William Faulkner Wisdom Creative Writing Award. And her debut, Marion Hatley, was a finalist for the Nielsen Prize for a first novel. Beyond her fiction, Beth's stories and essays have appeared in publications such as Crime Reads, Ars Medica, and Writing and Wellness. Known for her ability to blend emotional depth and haunting atmosphere, Beth continues to craft stories that unsettle, engage, and resonate with readers long after the final page. Let us welcome Beth to the show. How are you doing tonight, Beth?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for hosting me, and thank you for that very kind and generous introduction. I appreciate it.
I appreciate that too. Yeah, thank you for being with us. I'm going to raise the screen here a little bit here because you're a little bit too low on my screen, so I'm going to change this. How's that? Okay. So, we're happy to have you, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic. You know, we've had some actors on the show from the genre, the horror genre. I actually worked on Conjuring 3 and got to talk with a lot of the cast and crew and their experiences with horror from the production side of it. But you're from the storytelling side. This is where it all really happens. And I was looking, I haven't read your book, but I read a synopsis about it. And it sounds like it's right up there with some of my favorite movies like The Others. And it's just like almost like a classic haunted house, but with a twist. So why don't you, I guess, give us a little bit of background about The Inhabitants and what inspired you to write this?
I just want to say, first of all, when you mentioned The Others, I was just thinking about that movie tonight. It's so funny. I just thought about how haunted I was by that film and the interior, the dark interiors, and sort of the idea of what's on either side of the veil, and
Yes.
that. And so I love that movie. So we're in the same groove talking about that.
I mean, it's a fantastic one. I mean, it just, I didn't see it coming, honestly. And I usually can tell, usually horror films are transparent enough that you can kind of predict them. That one really took me for a ride. The whole idea of, I guess it's been out for long enough that we can talk about the twist, but just the whole idea that the people that felt that they were haunted were the ones haunting. So I thought that was just so brilliant.
Yeah, I didn't see that one coming either. And it was so heartbreaking the way that it dealt with grief, because I feel like just like segue into my book, like it definitely, a lot of the characters in my book are grieving and they almost want to see ghosts and don't, but then, that ends up, at least to a couple of the characters that ends up manifesting that way. But just, kind of the nugget of the story is that, this artist and her young daughter move into this house that she's inherited from a great aunt who she never really knew. But she's kind of struggling financially. So she moves into this house, and it was built by a 19th century architect whose creations were said to influence the mind supposedly in beneficial ways. And she goes into this house and all kinds of weird things start happening. And she's not quite sure if it's the house or if something's going on with her. And then there's also kind of a housekeeper figure who's kind of, I see her as like kind of a bridge between the house, the mysteries of the house, and the main character. Like she's sort of this shadowy figure who knows more than she kind of reveals at first. So there's kind of different things going on, but the house, I definitely say like the house is a main character, one of the main characters in the story for sure.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, and I guess that would make sense for a horror film or a haunted house story, rather, I should say, whether it be a film or a book. That the house is sort of one of the main characters when you think about it. It sounds though that this has a very psychological component to it too, which in my opinion is what makes the horror genre great. If it's just supernatural, in your face monsters, that kind of feels rather cheap and superficial. I prefer there to be something going on, like you said with the others. It's like there was an emotional depth there. There was grief there that was sort of the catalyst for the experiences, and the supernatural aspects were basically secondary. They were just plot devices to get you to these realizations. It sounds like that's what's happening here with the Inhabitants.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think just to echo what you said, like I'm so down with the thing of like the psychological elements of a story really are what engaged me the most. I mean, the whole thing with like the jump scares and blood and guts stuff. I don't like that. I mean, I really like when it helps us even reflect upon and mine into our own reactions to things emotionally and psychologically. And I think like, just with the theme of the Inhabitants with grief, like that's something that's going on in multiple dimensions in my novel. Like the main character is grieving a couple of losses, and then actually some of the otherworldly entities are dealing with grief too. As strange as that may sound, like how can someone who's dead have grief? Well, they do, and in the others that actually happen too. So it kind of is dealing with that very human emotion that we all go through. If we live long enough and we're lucky enough to love people, we're going to suffer with grief, right? So
Yeah.
It's part of the human experience, and I think I would actually argue an essential part of the human experience. We can get too lost in the minutia, that sometimes it takes an emotional jolt to bring us back to realizing what's important. Unfortunately, if we could be more mindful, maybe that would not have to be the case. But for most people, I think the meaning of life actually comes from understanding what it means to lose that life. So horror kind of gives us, I think, insight into that. So there's the psychological component, but there's also the fear component. So how do you balance those with the Inhabitants? Because that's really, I think, the perfect recipe for a horror story, in my opinion, is you have to have the psychological, you have to have suspense, and then you have to have fear. There has to be a way to feel that fear, not just like, jump scare. I'm not talking jump scare. Obviously, with a novel, that's harder to do. But there has to be something that draws you into it and makes you feel the terror that the characters are experiencing. So how do you work that for the Inhabitants?
yeah, I think a lot of it happens on a few different levels. One of the things I'd say is that part of the fear is what's happening, not with the spirit world, but with the human world. I mean, the protagonist is dealing, without trying to giving too much away, that there ends up being a very living and breathing person who turns out to be very dangerous. And some of the spirit world that she encounters is sort of, she's kind of, it seems scary at first, but I feel like the spiritual end of things are almost more in tune with what's going on in her psychologically, and it's more on her side in a certain way than the real world dark, scary stuff is. So, and I kind of like that idea. I mean, just different ghost stories I hear from people. I mean, the classic ghost stories, so the ghost is scary and out to get you. But I think like there's also the idea that sometimes ghosts are, I think especially in a house that's been around for a while, that accumulates lives and experiences, that sometimes those are kind of areas of wisdom, for lack of a better word. And I think that the fear, I think even one of the characters in my book actually says something like, I think we have more to fear from the living. And I would try to play up that a bit in the book.
That's brilliant. I've said that. I'm an exorcist when I'm not doing this show. And actually I'm a bishop when I'm not doing this show. But part of my job as a bishop, and what sort of brought me into, I guess you could say, the spotlight, was not being a bishop, because nobody really cares about that. But exorcism people do care about, because it's scary, it's fascinating, it's suspenseful, and it's outside of the ordinary range of most people's realm of experience, particularly Catholic exorcism, which is more dramatic and better storytelling. That's why you never see like some random exorcist who's like a Baptist or something in a movie. It's always a Catholic, right? Because it just makes for better storytelling. So I will say, people are always asking me, are you afraid of the demons? Are you is it scary to you to go into a haunted house and deal with this? And I said, no, it's not even a little bit. But I said, if I feel any unease or anxiety at all, it's people. It's the people I might have to deal with when I go, because they're scary. People are scary. The human mind can be very frightening. Anybody that has fallen asleep at night and had a nightmare, you sometimes wonder, how did that come out of me? And that all comes, it spawns out of all of our repressed emotions and everything that sort of gets built into a story that's told and will terrify you if the nightmare's really good at it. I mean, I've had a few doozies in my life. I'm sure everybody listening has. I'm sure you have. So I like that. I like the idea, because people are really, I think, the true horror. People are the true demons. In my estimation, when I'm performing exorcism, I think it's common for people from the outside looking in to think that there's all these supernatural creatures that I'm expelling to the pits of hell, and they're worried about it, because they're like, well, could they leave that person and enter into you? Could they? Probably because the movie The Exorcist shows that, and I'm like, no, that's what I'm really expelling is very toxic, very sick elements of the human psyche. I'm removing archetypes from them. That's what's being cast out, and that's being eradicated in the process. Once you understand it's a psychological process that's using incorporeal tools to do it, then it starts to make more sense. But it's really so far out there. But I would imagine writing a book, writing a story that's dark and frightening, touches on some of these repressed aspects of your own psyche. So, and do you find that you're drawing out of your own fears when you write this? Is that because they say writers need to write what they know. They say the best writers write what they know. So is there something about your own life that you've put into this story?
Yeah, it's funny. I always think about this with my writing, and I feel like I hardly ever base anything on my actual real life. But that said, there's no way I'm not mining all of my experiences and fears and everything. So I would say that very, in a sense of my personal thoughts and experiences, I find any space that's been lived in for a long time, especially old houses, inherently fascinating. So I think that's what drew me. I mean, even when I was a little girl, I lived in a fairly, a modernish suburban home. And I don't know, even from when I was just a small girl, I thought I want to live in an old house. And I don't know what was driving that, but I feel like the older I got, I thought it's because I just feel like there's all these layers of lives and experiences. And so I thought one of the things that this book really tapped into was that. And I thought, so what can I make of that? What would it be to really tap into that in terms of fiction? And I thought, well, why don't I have the main character as an artist? So she's really visually and sensorily in tune to spaces. And, she has that kind of ability to see in these different ways that she's very sensitive to in this home. And then I thought, well, why don't I also have an architect who was really bent on having, it looks like a Victorian home in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of things going on that kind of, he can mold people who live there psychologically in a way that he hopes is beneficial, but that might be a little bit off the hinges every now and then. So I think the whole basis, I hope I'm answering your question, but I think the whole basis is that space and home and architecture and lived experience in a home is kind of what I was really tapping into.
Well, there is definitely in my own work, doing what I do, and I've been in numerous haunted locations and experienced numerous hauntings throughout both my life and the work that I do, coming into, basically most of the time when people contact me because they have a spiritual problem, what really ends up being the issue is some kind of disturbance in the environment, more so than what they're really, sometimes it's attached to them, but a lot of times it's environmental that becomes sort of an attachment to them. And there is sort of a psychometry is the word I'm looking for that gets embedded into the walls of a home, particularly an old home. It seems to collect the memories that happen there, the traumas, particularly for hauntings, or at least malevolent hauntings that people experience. The traumas get collected into the structure. Some people say it's the wood. That wood absorbs energy, but I think it's really just the location itself, and a lot of things that people refer to as ghosts are really manifestations of those memories that sort of, maybe at some kind of quantum mechanical level or some kind of theoretical physics level, sort of can be brought through our consciousness to witness, and it becomes almost like a repetition. You see the events over again. A lot of hauntings are described that way. So have you ever in your life, have you ever experienced a haunting or lived in a haunted location?
I had one weird, I mean, it's funny. People have asked, oh, you must have experienced a lot of ghostly things. There's only really one thing that really sticks out in my mind. And it was years ago when I was living and working on Cape Cod. And I happened to be in this, attached unit onto, they call them, I guess the old term was mother-in-law apartments on the back of a house near the beach. And it was such a lovely place. I could hear the ocean at night. It was very close to the shore. And I just loved it. And it was a charming little place. But there was one time when I left for work, and my landlord was very careful about saying whenever there were going to be workers there, they would always let me know. No one was admitted into the premises without my knowledge or permission in advance. And one time I came home from work, and this was like in May or June. It was pretty warm, and the thermostat was turned all the way up. The house was just burning hot, and then all the casement windows upstairs were wide open. And I thought, this is weird. And I thought, could the wind have blown them open and not really? They had that really tight seal lock where the wind just couldn't come. And my landlord, actually, he was a very nice man, and he actually asked me the next day. He goes, "Do you mind keeping the windows closed when you're gone?" And I said, "Sure." And I was too embarrassed to say, like, I didn't do it. You know what I mean? Like, I thought, like, the guy's going to think I'm losing it if I tell him what happened. Right. And then, but then I thought, whatever, this is just a fluke thing. And then, like, a couple weeks later, it happened again. And I thought, I don't know what this is or what's going on. I mean, I know that the landlord's daughter had lived in the place before me, and I know she died very prematurely, I think in her 30s. So I didn't know if it had something to do with that. I was at a complete loss, so I don't know what to make of it, but that's probably the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me personally.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well,
I don't know if you have any thoughts about what might be going on.
I mean, it could be so many things, honestly, but I mean, if a person dies unexpectedly, that almost always leads, in our experience, to some kind of well, I mean, I guess in the more common sense, an unfinished business type of haunting. But what it really seems to be, in my metaphysical opinion, is that when you're not prepared to die, and you weren't really ready for it, then you don't necessarily know it happened. Kind of like the others, you don't really know it happened. And then what you start to live in that moment, your range of experience at that point becomes just hyperfixated on the trauma that led to it. So if it's an unexpected death, then that's what it is. If it's a murder, for example, which is a big one for hauntings, it's the trauma and the shock and the horror of being murdered, and that gets sort of built into the dying and death experience for that person. And that's what needs to be released. It's not so much that when they say ghosts need to cross over and you have these mediums come in, they're going, I'm going to cross them over. What they're really doing is they're removing, or what they should be doing is removing the trauma, so that once the trauma's gone, then there's nothing that anchors them here. And that is at least metaphysically the best way I can describe it, from experiencing it myself and seeing how we actually go about ending these hauntings. And we're actually quite good at it. We're very successful at getting that done. But when I was working, I came to work on the Conjuring 3 set because the previous movies had disturbances that were related to very I would say very uncomfortable spiritual or supernatural experiences, haunting like experiences that happened on set to some of the actors, some of the cast, and so it became a tradition that every Conjuring movie they do, they will bring in a priest to bless the set and the crew for those who want it. Just so that they can hopefully get through it without having any of those things happen, like the Annabelle doll. You're familiar with the Conjuring series?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay, so the Annabelle doll, the whole movie, it had its own spin-off, and then it was, of course, in one of the films. The Annabelle doll, can move around, right? That's the true story, alleged true story behind it, but also the story that's being told in the movie. And the actors would find that the prop doll, and they had several of them, would walk around. That would end up in different places that nobody had been, and cameras on, and like you could see like movement just off camera, but there wasn't really anybody there. And then they'd go back in there and they'd find the doll in another location. And they wanted to know, how is this possible? Because this is not the actual Annabelle doll. The Annabelle doll's a Raggedy Ann, the one in the movie is like this, almost like this antique kind of looking doll, and they want to know how is that possible? And I said, well, it's because we animate it with our fear and expectations and everything else. So when you're engaging archetypes as an actor, when you're telling a story and you're bringing it to life, you're literally injecting life into all of the elements, including the props, and they start to take on the very physical characteristics of whatever it is. And if you're doing it well, if you're doing it right, if you're telling a really good story and you're making a really good movie, which I would say The Conjuring is an excellent expression of horror, then you can actually make life happen. You can actually, because the universe doesn't know the difference between fiction and nonfiction. It just knows what you know. And if it's real for the actor, and a true method actor would make it as if it's real, right? Then it becomes real because we say it's real. So did you find when you're writing these stories that you start to maybe have perceptions or experiences that sort of relate synchronistically or serendipitously to what you're writing? Do you find that it sort of brings some of that life into your normal waking consciousness?
It's funny. I'd have to say it all happens in my head and on the page when I'm writing, and that is enough for me, because really
that's
when
good.
I write, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense of like, I would totally welcome if experiences came into my actual living world, that would be totally fine. But I find that when I'm really into the writing process, I almost feel like I'm enter another world. And I don't know if it is like what you were saying about method acting, but I am so much in that physical space and moving around and seeing things and witnessing things that it's so for me to write about anything in a vivid or really felt way, I really have to inhabit that space, both physically and psychologically. So I feel like I do have a very rich experience. It's all in my head. It's nothing that I'm seeing around me at the time.
Right.
And so that's how I would describe it, basically.
Well, that's good that you're not bringing these things into, your normal day, because that could become disruptive if you were. But it's interesting because I don't think we've ever had an actual storyteller on this show. Like we've talked, like I said, to actors and casts and people that are involved in making stories appear on film, but never really the mind or getting into the mind of the people that create those stories and how that works. Because so much of what we teach here on this show, and I'd also teach an esoteric webinar, is the power of archetypes. How archetypes literally create and control our reality. They become the building blocks of creation, you could argue, and say that once you understand your relationship to these archetypes, then you can understand how much power you actually have as a being in this universe. That it really does, once you know how to speak to them well, the universe does sort of obey you. And again, like I said, most people don't have any mastery over that. So you'll have these actors and they make Annabelle dolls walk around and they think that the Annabelle doll's possessed now, but it's really just their own expectation being imprinted and having a sort of metaphysical effect on the prop. But for writing, you know, that where do you find your inspirations come from? Because I know that I used to write. I don't write that much anymore. I actually kind of find, no disrespect, I find it very tedious now. I don't know why. I used to love it. I don't enjoy it as much anymore. So I don't write stories as like I used to. I have great stories in my head, but I think I'd rather be like a showrunner than an actual, you know, writer, because I can sort of like bring it together, but I don't think I'd necessarily be really good at just sitting there in front of my computer and typing words on a page, which I do find tedious. Maybe it was just too many years of college and I just couldn't do it anymore after that. I think that's actually what it was. It was the dissertation. It was, it's like I never want to write again. But when it comes to pulling inspiration, whether it be painting a painting with oils or writing music, I don't find that I'm actually creating these stories. I feel as though like the muses from, you know, the ancient world, I feel like it's being given to me. And if I'm not connected, I can't do it. Like I can't be creative. So I guess that's the writer's block thing versus inspiration. But how does that manifest for you? Do you find it to be almost a spiritual experience, like as if these ideas are being given to you from somewhere else?
Yeah, you know, it's such a combination of two things for me. Like, first of all, just backing up to what you said about writing. Writing has never ceased to be difficult for me. It's just hard. Like, I don't mean to complain at all. I feel so lucky to be doing it, but it is hard. I find it to be hard work. I mean, especially if I feel like the writing is going well, it's hard work. But I think that what kind of getting into what you were saying, it seems like two paradoxical things where part of it is keeping my ass in a chair and working and like, okay, this is like, I have to show up and be there. This might not be a day that's going to go so great with me with my writing, but I have to show up. Mm-hmm. And then I have to open myself to ideas. So a lot of times that'll happen when I'm not writing. I'll be out for a run or I'll be walking around and I'll think, oh man, you know, I mean, I just had this idea for a new book come to me that I haven't started working on, but it just came to me when I was walking around. So that's the unexpected time when things are kind of brewing. There's the ass in my chair time, and somewhere between those worlds where the dreamy world and the ass in the chair time meet, then something will start to flow. You know, that idea, I'll start putting things together. And it doesn't flow like magic. Like I often I have a lot of false starts. I have an idea about where I think a story might go and where it might work. And it doesn't always go smoothly, but once I just have those basic ideas down, like for the Inhabitants, for instance, it started with the house, the architect, and the artist. And I thought those are the kind of the main things. So how am I going to put that together in a story? And part of that is to go a little more out into the weeds, the dreamy, the basic ideas, and then the idea of like, how do I create a compelling story? Like, I feel like there has to be something that the main character is driven to know or find out or want, and then get it through the pages. And there has to be attention to pacing. Like, I feel like you guys probably feel like with movies, right? Like I feel like we all know when we read a book or see a movie where like things are just moving along, you're really like into it, turning the pages, and then things just kind of sag a little bit, and you're like, the story's drifting. Like, I feel like, you know, part of the job of writing a novel in this genre too is, I think, keeping the story running and keeping a mind on pacing and knowing when to move things along and when to slow down and let the environment and the story kind of open up and let the story breathe a little bit. Like maybe when I think in the Inhabitants, when the main character Nilda is getting into the mysteries of the house and like, how does this strange house and the architectural forms in it work? Like, she has to kind of slows down then, but then it picks up when you know, she's under some of the dangers that she faces. It kind of picks up. So kind of a roundabout way of answering your question, but there's a lot of different moving parts, I guess.
Yeah, no, I fully understand that. That's it's kind of brilliant how it comes together like that, and how it connects in certain ways that there are, like you say, days where the connections just aren't being made and it's more of a struggle. You got to work harder and it becomes perhaps more frustrating. But I'm sure there's also days, though, where it just flows and you can't stop. And in time almost seems to get away from you. Do you find that to be true, too?
Oh yeah, those are the best days. I mean, those are the days that I think I would never want to stop writing for that reason. And,
Yeah.
even if it's one day out of 5 or whatever, it's worth it. So you're absolutely right about that for sure.
What would you say the ratio is for aspiring writers out there? What's the ratio of like writer's block days versus high inspiration days?
It depends, it really varies. Like it's very like, for me, sometimes it'll be like, oh, this is a really great week. And other, weeks it'll be like, oh, this sucks. And it depends on your real life too. Like if you have stuff going on in real world, that's like you're struggling with, or, something you're dealing with that can affect it too. But all I need to know is that the minute that stops, if that ever stops happening with my writing, I'll fold it up. I'll fold my tent and go say goodbye to it. But so far, so that keeps happening. So
Well, imagine that it could start to get in there, right? You have like you get cut off on the road, or somebody says something rude to you, and then puts you in a bad mood. And then you go home and write, and then you find that now the character's, acting in a certain way that's not consistent with what they've been doing before. And then you have to stop at yourself and say, well, wait a minute, I'm projecting too much of myself into this situation, right? I mean, that probably is something you have to always catch yourself with, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
The world has a way of intruding, I guess, for everyone, right? In everyone's lives, whatever your endeavors are, that can, throw you off your game a little bit.
It can. Well, I mean, even for the reader, right? Because sometimes you might hit a nerve that you might be talking about something that just triggers a person and hits them a certain way, be it positive or negative. And maybe they have to put it down because it's too close to home, or it feels too real, and they have to stop. I mean, I know when I don't really have a lot of time, unfortunately, to read novels today, and I can sometimes get really bad headaches if I spend too much time in a book. So my reading isn't as prolific as it used to be when I was younger. But I used to read a lot of. I think I had read every book Stephen King ever wrote, because I love the horror genre, and I like suspense, and I like psychological horror, and he did that very well, particularly with Misery, which was one of my favorite ones. There were a few others I can't think of off the top of my head, but they had some good ones.
The Stand. I don't know if you read. I loved The Stand.
The Stand. A lot of characters. That was tough to keep track of who everyone was, but once you get, I started writing them down so I could remember. There's a lot of characters in that book. But there was one. Which one was it? It was basically the entire book is from the perspective of the main character, who's basically, she was having a sexual relationship with, it might have been either a boyfriend or a husband or something, but they were into the bondage stuff. So she was locked up to the bedpost the entire book. And then there's like
Gerald's Game. I think it was
that's what it was.
Game.
Gerald's Game. It was. And the whole story is weird things happening because the guy dies. He has a heart attack or something, and she can't get free. And the entire book is these weird things happening in the room while she's locked up in this compromised situation. And I thought that was, dark and really disturbing, but also really brilliant at the same time. And it was just fascinating to read that and think about, the being in a situation where you're compromised, where you're restricted, you can't get away, and these horrifying things continue to develop. And then she starts to regress back to things in her youth that are leading to these things that she's seeing now. I don't remember the entire, I'd love to read it again because I don't remember it'd be like reading it for the first time, but I do remember that premise. And I think that's such a brilliant premise. And Stephen King really could get you into the heads of the characters in a certain way. I think he defines horror by sort of the worst things that he could come up with, and then putting that into the lives of his characters. How do you define horror? How do you deal with the genre?
I just want to echo something, just going back to Stephen King. I think in this, answer your question.
Sure.
But I think like one of the main things that I think that horror needs to do is the horror writer needs to have empathy for the characters. And I think Stephen King like does that a lot. I think he does it like the most brilliant way, I think maybe is in his first novel, Carrie. Like, I feel like, we see throughout the much of the book, we really see Carrie being bullied by her high school classmates, by her mother. And, when her telekinetic powers come to the fore at that climax at the prom, and she just, exacts this vengeance. We feel like it feels so earned because we feel like we bought into all of her misery. And it's almost like, I think if he hadn't built so much empathy for Carrie, we wouldn't have felt that invested. We would just see her as a monster and not as this really set upon young woman who was just, really just brought to the state of things. So I think that, any horror novel that I write, I see empathy as being prime. I mean, I feel like I hope that I really care about the characters when I'm writing about them. And I'm hoping that when readers read the characters and the stories, they'll empathize with them, even if they feel a little bit creeped out by them, that they'll be able to understand what's driving them and feel invested in what's at stake for the characters. So I know that sounds weird because you think horror, empathy, they don't really fit together, but I really feel like if characters feel really flat and they're just moving around and doing things, but we don't really know what's driving them, I feel like it's hard to really care about anything that they experience.
I think
however scary.
I would say empathy is an absolutely essential part to any story, but I think even more so in horror, because horror is the one thing about horror that might be different than anything else. And I guess every genre has a way of dealing with this, but horror really wants you to feel the real. It wants to make something that's not ordinary experience real to you. That's unique, I think, to horror. And I don't think that's achievable without some kind of empathy with the character. And you need to have a strong character that has a lot of depth to it, a lot of structure in order to be able to do that. Like, take, for example, I don't know if you've seen I'm sure you've seen the original, but I'm not sure you've seen the remake, Poltergeist. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
The original characters with Jo Beth Williams and Heather O'Rourke and Zelda Rubinstein, I think is her name. There's so many good actors in that film. Every time you get to know a character in that film, which is also just really good storytelling, you can relate. They almost feel like people The movie shows you mundane things like them eating breakfast or, having an argument with the neighbor. These are not necessary. I mean, they do find a way to create some kind of weirdness with it, but overall what it's showing is normalcy so that you can feel like these are people that maybe even your own family. The remake had none of that depth. They all felt like just like shells. You might as well just created an AI movie with just automatons and call it a day, because it was so shallow and one-dimensional, the characters were, that it made the entire movie feel shallow and one-dimensional to the point that it wasn't scary anymore. They made it more in-your-face kind of jump scare and much less so something that you could relate to, because what made, I think, Poltergeist, in my opinion, it's my favorite horror film of all time. What I loved the most about it was that it really centers on the love of the parents trying to get their daughter back. And that's what anchors you into the horror, because the horror is not so much the ghosts or the tombs coming up from the ground. It's the thought of losing what's most precious to you,
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you told me the second Poltergeist doesn't work. I love the first one and I didn't see the new one, so I'm glad. I'll just skip it.
You can just skip it. Yeah. The only cool thing about it is that because of the day and age of paranormal television, they did add this feature where they put a camera into the little vortex that opens where she goes into the other side, where the little girl ends up, and you can see kind of what she sees on the other side, whereas in the original we never really get to see that much. You get like the lights and the flashing and everything, but you never really see what the other side looks. I mean, you do in the sequel, I guess, but overall, maybe what makes a good horror story the best is when you don't see what's really out there, when you have to use your imagination, which is always worse than what really is, right? Just like real life.
Definitely the unknown, right?
Yeah.
The unknown is so, I think in real life too, right? The unknown is often more terrifying than what we can perceive.
Yeah. It almost always. Because I think, again, because you were talking about, it kind of circles back to people are really the scary thing, right? They're the real monsters. And that's because our psyches are horrifying. I mean, they can conjure up some of the worst things. I mean, we have this entire genre because of it. Because Stephen King is a prime example of an author that made a very successful career out of writing about the worst things he could possibly conjure up and think that could happen to a person, and that's scary.
Because fear makes us fascinated by it.
Yeah.
It's something everybody loves to be scared a little bit.
It's like a roller
I think
coaster.
that's true.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Thrive on that dopamine drop,
Definitely.
Well, and stories only work because we can identify with them.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's like you said earlier about basically, if you don't create somebody that a reader or a viewer cares about, why would you care? How you're not going to be frightened? You're not going to be, or if it's a love story, you're not going to have any feelings of empathy or. And so we have to be able to identify it. And I think the sort of, for me, it's amusing, but for a lot of people, it's terrifying. Is actually if they reflected, they'd realize that the only reason they're able to identify with, films like Seven or any horror genre is because in fact they can imagine,
they can picture it
being that.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it shouldn't scare them. Actually, that's human nature, right? That's our fallen nature.
Well, the premise is
it's very confronting.
The premise is to put yourself into that compromised position. So, like for example, Gerald's game is that you're supposed to identify with her being in this horrific situation, experiencing these horrific things, and what would that be like to you? All of them. I mean, The Shining is another one. I mean, really, what would it be like to be? I think we're supposed to identify with the mom, and even less so than the boy, because she's just going with her husband to this remote hotel to
idyllic place,
to take care of it, and he just loses his mind out there and wants to just go murderous rage on them. And what would that feel like if the person you're married to would change and now there's no hope of getting away. There's no way you can run to. There's no one that you can call to rescue you. You're on your own, and that's scary, that because that's something that could happen even outside of the ESP and the psychic stuff that's added in for the supernatural fun, and of course ultimately The Shining is a haunted house story. I mean, it really is. But it, particularly the movie, how Stanley Kubrick, I think, took what Stephen King wrote and made it even more brilliant, because he took with it
genius on top of genius.
Genius on top of genius. And if you look at Steve, it really did, because when you look at what Stanley Kubrick does with every film, you can do it. Try it. I challenge you all. Pop in a Stanley Kubrick movie. Doesn't matter which one. Okay. And freeze frame anywhere randomly. You could actually print that out and put it on your wall. Everything is perfectly lined up as if it's a work of art. We don't really have too many directors and producers that care enough to to put that much into it. Of course, I heard he was hell to work with, but anyway, that's besides the point. I guess genius is hell to work with.
Geniuses are.
Yeah, it's true. But it all serves to bring us into the experience of those archetypes that are being brought alive by the story, and it's just a way of making the story even more real. I would guess, but there's also something kind of truly frightening about being alone, in your home at night, and opening a book and reading these things and getting into it each time, and then letting your mind and your imagination wander. It can feel quite unsettling, if you're reading something that's on the fringe of horror, or even if it's something that could be psychologically possible, which is worse, in my opinion.
Definitely. Yeah, that's one of my best compliments. A couple of my friends said that they stopped reading my book at night because they were so scared. So I took that as a high compliment.
That's a compliment. Yeah.
It is, and I can tell you right now,
That's
Beth, I'm seeing a lot of people they're saying that they already bought the book. You already bought your book, so. And my wife's an avid reader. She'll probably get it
for you.
Oh, great!
Oh, great! Thank you. It's funny. Like, this is I don't know if I don't know if you guys read this book or saw the movie, but I think one of those frightened I was reading a book was, I think I was like 12 or 13, and I read Peter Straub's Ghost Story. I don't know if there was the movie and then the book, and I think the book, I don't know if it would hold up the same way when I read it now, but it was, I think when I was 12 or 13, it was one of the most terrifying things I read. And I think I almost couldn't, I did not sleep properly for like I don't know how many days after that. So that was an early education in being scared to death by a book.
That's how you know it's a good book.
That's how you know it's good. Yeah. And again, it gets back to that connection. I think the reason movies like The Exorcist and The Shining, Misery, the reason these stories are so good is because they're plausible. Even outside of their supernatural elements, they're plausible things. People can go crazy, and you might see things. You might think a ghost is forcing you to do something, but it's still the horror of the person doing it, right? I mean, no ghost ever hurt the characters. It was just what was the character? Was it Jack? Was the character's name Jack in the book? I can't remember in The Shining.
I think his name was Jack. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah. Okay. So, Jack is the only one that really hurts. I guess, yeah, he's the only one that hurts anybody in there. It's not the ghost. I mean, the story kind of leads you to think that the ghost convinced him to do it, but then you have to ask yourself the whole time, is that just not in his head? He's thinking that these things are telling him to do these things, and he's having an unhealthy relationship with this place, or is it the energy of the hotel? And I mean, there's a lot of different. I mean, I know the book plays into the supernatural far more than the Stanley Kubrick movie, which makes it, I think, more psychological to the point that you can think that maybe he's just going crazy. I remember showing The Shining to one of my friends for the first time, and and if you've never seen for those in the audience who have never seen the movie, I'm not going to spoil too much, but it starts by telling you the day of the week. So it's like Sunday, and then and then Monday, and then there's all these things that happen. Like they arrive, and then you see them being introduced and walked around the hotel, and then on Monday there's other family interaction. You can see them kind of getting settled, and then it's like, and then he, the main character Jack was played by Jack Nicholson in this movie, perhaps his most brilliant performance ever, probably the best one he's ever done, I think. He's slowly deteriorating, and he's typing a story. He's writing the whole time, but she thinks he's working hard. When she finally gets down there and sees, that what he's typing, it's just, he keeps repeating the same sentence over and over and over again, right? All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, I think. So that becomes like her moment of horror, like what's happened to my husband. But I remember on like one of the days, it just shows you like Wednesday, and he's just looking, staring into space at the camera, and he's getting this look on his face that's just pure like it's just terrifying to see. And that's it. And then it goes to Wednesday, and my friend says, and that was just, and that, it goes to Thursday, and she goes, and that was just Wednesday. That kind of suspense, I think, makes storytelling just so brilliant. So we're talking with Beth Castrodale about her book, The Inhabitants. And we're going to talk more about this story and horror when we come back, and also take some of your questions. So don't go away.
Are you scared? I am you.
Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. We've been having a very engaging conversation with our guest tonight, Beth Castrodale, about her book, The Inhabitants. Go check it out on Amazon. We'll also put more links up there in the chats so that you can more easily find it. But it's easy to find. Just do a Google search, you'll come across it. And now we're going to be taking your questions, if you have any. You can do that by asking them in the chat, which most of you prefer to do, or you can call into the show at 802-321-0073. That's 802-321-0073. For now, you can still use Skype and until they take it away next month, but you can contact us internationally for free on Skype. Just call Eye of the Seer, EYEOFTHESEER. And we'll bring you on the air if you have any questions. But we already got some questions in the chat. We're going to get to them all here in just a moment. Don't go away. You know, Austin over on Facebook, I see your message there. You know, I want you to be rest assured, regardless of what you did when you were 24 years old, you cannot sell your soul to the devil. It is not possible. It's not yours to give. And it's only an illusion. It's a trick. But I'd like to talk with you more about that. If you want to call into the show on our next Open Lines, Open Topics, I'll be more than happy to discuss that with you. Or you can also contact us at office@nicholayan.org. That's office@nicholean.org. But please do not worry yourself about selling your soul to the devil, because it is not possible. Okay, so I'm sure we have some questions out there. I noticed some of them coming in while we were talking the last hour.
I've got some.
Okay, so Father, let's go for it. Let's jump right in here.
I've got some of my own.
Okay, great. No, please do.
I mean, I'm a writer, but I generally write I write biographies. So that's because I was going to say I write in non-fiction genre, but actually biographies are a mixture of fiction and non-fiction, because our lives are. Even though I do authorized biographies, you know, how a person remembers what happened is not necessarily the truth. Right.
Right.
Anyway, but so I'm and more recently I spend most of my time writing speeches and opinion articles for politicians. So I kind of have to write in other people's names as well, which is an interesting sort of experience. So some of these questions are a bit self-indulgent, but hopefully they'll be of wider use to other people. But you talked about a lot of the time it's about keeping your butt in the chair to get, you know, writing long form. I feel it.
I believe she said ass in the chair, Father.
She did say ass.
Did you? Okay. Do you know what? I initially wrote that down, but I thought, she wouldn't have said that.
Yeah, she did.
I would have.
See, I like that. That's about the realism. It's about realism. You know, no pretense here, right? No pretense. We go all the way.
Self-accountability.
and also, the word "but" doesn't really mean anything with me,
it means nothing.
other than listening to Americans say it.
Yeah.
But, so my first question is, how do you do that? Like, because, and I speak with empathy. How do you do that?
It's funny. Like, I think this may sound weird, but I'm kind of a stubborn person. Like, I make up my mind about stuff, and I think like stubbornness and habit are very much related to me. So I feel like, I'm a runner. So every morning I get up and I go for my run. It's like brushing my teeth. I get up, I try to really write every single day, and that is just, it is just literally putting my ass in the chair. Like, I feel like I have to have the discipline to do that. And because I know that one thing is for sure, if I don't do that, it's just, my writing is never going to happen. And I'm very privileged in that I don't have an office job anymore. So I have very flexible hours and I can do that. And I just feel like it's kind of my stubbornness kicking in. I'm like, my novels will never get written if I don't do that. So it's just, I just managed to keep that with me every day.
I've been kind of wrestling with this because, for whatever reason, and it's not because I'm being paid for it, it's definitely not that. Money doesn't motivate me, but I find it easier to be disciplined of getting something written if it's for somebody else. Mm-hmm. But if it's for me, I find it hard to do. It's a weird thing. I don't know whether you've written in other people's names or whether you understand that dynamic. I don't know, but I guess. Oh
yeah, definitely with work stuff. That's the whole other thing. Like, I know, okay, there's a deadline on this project. I feel like, I think of myself as a conscientious person. I hope I am, but I feel like if I really feel committed, if I have a deadline in a work thing, I really feel like committed to that. But I also feel like, I know what you mean though, with your, like, for a long time, especially I think when I had like an office job, I had to thought, oh, I'm so tired. I don't, from work, I don't really want to write. So that was more like, at that point I was doing a lot of my writing on the weekends, but I would still try to have some kind of imposed discipline, but it is really hard. And I think but it's almost like, I think with any, even with exercise, I think the more you do it, the more you do it, and I really feel like you kind of get into the habit over time. If you really carve out that, sacred space for it and just really keep doing it, the habit will form, I think.
Yeah, that's good advice. Maybe, I'll try and be more bloody minded with myself about it. What's your favorite horror novel?
Oh gosh, there's so many of them, but I'm thinking of within the genre of the spooky house, the haunted house. I really have to say that I love The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I just think that book and all the book, and also I think the Mike Flanagan series that riffed off it are just spectacular. And I think that, especially with the house as a character, I think it's so brilliantly done. And I also really, in that same genre of haunted houses, I really love The House Next Door by Anne River Siddons. And she writes about this house that, unlike a lot of haunted house books, it's a brand new house. It was just built by this fancy architect. And the house ends up, it's a beautiful house, but it's really sinister. And it's like everyone who moves into it, some horrible thing befalls them. And it gets the neighbor to turn against neighbor ultimately. And it's just a really good book. So that is The House Next Door. I really recommend it. It's really good.
Yeah, I grew up in a Victorian house. I'm from England originally. And so, most of our houses are old. and so I kind of I identify with that Victorian era, and and obviously the romantic era of literature, and there were so many horror novels that were written in that time, and you got Mary Shelley, the Frankenstein, and
a lot of ways,
Dracula,
I'd say the British were really sort of the originators of the genre. Wouldn't you say that?
I think so.
Yeah.
You had Edgar Allan Poe did a reasonable job. He was an American.
Oh, I'd say
yeah.
he
Sells down too much.
Yeah. He did.
But I really kind of, having grown up in a Victorian house, and with a family that was open to these sorts of things. That's my sort of research, if you like, or my how do you do your research? You mentioned obviously you lived in that house in New England, and was it New England? I think it was.
Yeah, definitely Vermont. Yeah, it's where the house, Vermont, yeah. the house in the novel is in Vermont. So definitely, I did some architectural research. I was looking at some houses in Vermont in particular, and some of that architectural features that would be part of them. I also did. It's interesting. I I watched, this may sound bizarre, but I watched a lot of real like ghost hunting shows because the main character ends up getting hooked on them, and she's grieving her mom, and part of that her experiences is that she just kind of gets hooked on these shows. Like she's skeptical, but she wants to see. She's like has this idea that she's mourning her mother, and she's kind of jealous of the people who can connect with spirits, and she feels like she doesn't have that. So I watched a lot of that, and then I did a lot of research about how people talk about spirits. Like I think the idea that was brought up earlier about where like events get recorded in a house, like that kind of thing. Like what are the different ways people talk about having experience, haunted experiences in a home? So I did research into that. So there were, and also there's one of the characters is he's kind of an herbalist in a kind of a dark way. So I was looking at ways that different herbs and so forth can be said to have these different properties. So some different things, research all over the place, basically. But it was interesting to do it.
I mean, 'cause I guess that helps. You to doing research helps you to bring to draw a line between the everything that's in your mind to the something that needs to go on a page, to have some kind of filter mechanism to come to a point of writing a narrative. I guess that research sort of helps to in a sense remove the noise and focus on something that you can get into. Do you face any so your books are published, do you face any editorial arguments over language?
I think it's very civil generally when we have the editors I've worked with are great, and sometimes they'll make suggestions, and a lot of times I think there's just great, and actually way before that, before the publishing stage, I have a lot of other outside readers read drafts so they can comment on them, and I just really I so respect that input and find it so helpful, like. Because you probably know as a writer that sometimes you're so into a topic that you don't realize it's clear to you, but it's not clear to your reader what's going on. So having those, I really respect those outside voices. And in terms of word choice, I'm so open to, other people's ideas about, how a sentence could work or the right words. Sometimes I'll dig in my heels if I feel like, I really feel like this is the way that it needs to be said. But usually it's a very polite sort of discourse, I guess.
I mean, one of my things that keeps me motivated is my hobby is to try and get as many archaic uses of English into everything I write as possible. Partly because the way that you preserve language is by using it, right? If it falls out of use, it falls out of use. Friedrich Hayek had great things to say about the English language. It was never designed by central planning. It's a great argument for libertarian principles. But so that's one of my little motivators is to try and get some archaic use of English in there. But I currently live in Australia, so that can come up against some resistance. So I just wondered if it did with you.
One of the questions in the chat for you, Beth, is if you have any interest in the Inhabitants or any other one of your stories being made into a movie. Is that something that you would pursue or have tried to pursue?
It's funny. Like, I mean, I'd be up for it. I think like it's funny, like with in the publishing world, usually you have to be approached about, like, no one is approached, but I would be up for it. I mean, I think like it's funny because as I write novels, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, like I definitely see them as visual, and it's also almost like taking part in being a part of the experience and seeing it visually and experiencing it. So I see things sort of cinematically while I'm writing them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I think it would be a lot of fun. I mean, I think again about like when I was talking earlier about the Haunting of the Hill House and how Mike Flanagan worked with that story, and how it was such the idea of a television series versus a movie was so perfect for that, because that novel is just, there's so many corridors to that story, literally and figuratively, that I think that episodic approach just works so well for it. So I think there's really great ways. I mean, this is like probably a cliche to say it, but there's there's some things that writing can do that film can't do, and there's some things that film can. One quick brilliant scene, like what you were saying about The Shining, where there's that one day where we just see this crazed face of Jack.
Yeah, that's hard to do in a book. Yeah.
Like cinema, like there's some things that cinema is just meant to do. So I love it when a book, frightening book or whatever book is made, it's just done in the most brilliant way possible on film. Like you can't always pull it off, but when it is pulled off, it's just extraordinary, I think. So.
Well, ironically, Stephen King, as I understand it, was not happy with Stanley Kubrick's rendition, and eventually, when I guess Stephen King got big enough in the industry, he could get to the point that he could get it produced the way he wanted it, and he did this little mini series of the story that he wanted to tell that was very true to the book. And I don't think it did very well, because people were expecting The Shining again, and it wasn't that. It was a very different telling. The acting wasn't as good. The screenplay,
skill,
very much. And how can you top what Kubrick did, but he changed a lot. He did change a dramatic amount. Kubrick did, and I think that's something that authors struggle with, understandably so, as well as their fans, their readers. Harry Potter's a great example of this right now. I know that she's come into some controversy, but the original, the movies, that we all are familiar with, obviously had to cut a lot from J.K. Rowling's, and they changed a lot, particularly after the second movie. I think 1 and 2 were very true to the book, but 3 was a dramatic deviation, as I understand it. I never read them, but my wife did. And then everyone after that, they were much larger books, and so there was even less that they could include. So then they came out with this. I guess HBO is going to be doing a series that's going to take them like 10 or 12 years to get through them all, and they're going to do them like from what I understand, like everything in the book. So I mean, I guess how would you deal? How would you relate to having your story having to be butchered, chopped up, and then resorted into something else? Because that's probably what would happen if it made it to the movies. How would you feel about that?
It's funny. I think like the real artists in film they almost have to give it over or not. I mean, I don't know. I'm just speaking from the, speculation standpoint, but I feel like you almost have to, it's a different kind of form of art, and there's a different language to it, the language of, visual language in film versus words on a page. And I would, if you have a real artist working in that medium, I would trust them to do what they had to do. Because I think I think sometimes if there's something that's too, maybe getting at what you were saying with The Shining, if it's too literal to the book, it might not be as effective as if you conveyed a plot point or a character in a different way. Maybe you don't even need to have any words. There's just a shot, a sight, and it says everything that the writer would say. You know what I mean? So. Yeah. I would have to trust, given the right artist, I would just want them to run with the ball and just do what I probably could never do. I mean, I wouldn't try to write a screenplay or, I don't have those kind of chops. But I think the people who could do it know what they're doing. I mean,
I think the hard part for me would be when they betray the character. Like, for example, a big controversial thing that happened in a popular series that my wife and I watch is Outlander. I don't know if you've known the books. I
have to admit I haven't read the books or seen so I don't know. But
okay, it's good, and the Stars production is very good, but. The longer it goes on, the more they deviate from the source material, which really the fans for the Outlander books. Diana Gabaldon is the author for that one, who's a very technical writer. I mean, she writes history. She doesn't just write stories. She writes historical stories, and she gets they're almost encyclopedic in that's just the kind of writer she is. So. They're very detailed, but Claire, the main character in this, is, a very specific type of character. And they made a choice several seasons, which I guess each season is technically one of the books, but now they're kind of like taking stuff that happens in another book and putting into this season to try to tell the whole thing. And they're even finishing the series before she's finished with the last book. So that's creating controversy too, because now we're going to get a different ending because she's not sharing with them what the next book's going to include. She doesn't know herself what the next book's going to include. So they're just taking it upon themselves to end it their way. But one of the things that really got the fans upset was that Claire, who is a doctor from the modern era, ends up, it's kind of a little bit of a time travel romance story, honestly. It's more romance than time travel, but there's a big time travel element. She ends up back in Scotland of the 1700s. And you know, she takes her modern medicine skill into helping people, and you know, she looks like, sometimes she's called a witch because, you know, some of the things she can do is just so outside the paradigm that they think that she must be practicing witchcraft. So she gets into all sorts of trouble, and of course she's from the 60s, so she's also very well, feminist ideals have become part of her culture, and she takes that into the 1700s Scotland. That doesn't go over very well with a very, you know, man's world there, right? And so there's a lot of that kind of conflict, which makes it very interesting.
Scotland's still the 17th century.
Yeah. There you go. But they make good whiskey, so you can give them that, you know.
Yeah.
But so what ends up happening is in she never would do this in the book. And the character just wouldn't do this, period. But in the story, she starts to use ether. She creates ether because she's doing these operations and people are in pain. So, but she starts abusing it. And it's like that betrays the character in a character completely. And so it really upset the readers, and they kind of went after the author and like, why do you let them do that? And the author's like, I don't have any control of what they do. That's their baby. This is mine. You know, they do what they want with it. You know, but they bought it, they built it. You know, right. So, and now it's deviating even more. It's because now we're getting to the end. The series is wrapped. They've wrapped it, so they haven't aired it all yet, but they're done making this. So, in the books, like I said, the last book, and it might not even be the last one. She's even hinted that she might have another one coming, and it takes her forever to write these because she's not somebody that she doesn't stick to a deadline. However long it takes says however long it takes. If she can write in 2 years, it's 2 years. If it's 5 years, it's 5 years. And she's also up there in age. She's like in her 70s, I think. So people are worried that she might never finish. And they've asked her, you know, did you leave notes for another author to take over? And she goes, no. So if she dies, it's over. You know, we'll never know what happens. But what are your thoughts on all that?
The sound of her.
Yeah, she's a really spicy kind of. She's fun and she's very sarcastic. I think a little bit on the autistic spectrum, but in a really good way, because she just like is a no nonsense kind of person. She just says it like it is. If she offends people, it's just the way it is. I kind of understand that. But what do you think about that, Beth? Though, you know, having one of your characters betrayed by somebody taking your story and now turning it into something completely other than. It's like one thing to just have your, you know, make choices because something works better with film, but it's another thing to like change what you've created. That's got to be hard for an author. Yeah.
Hijacked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you raised a really good point. I mean, I think if it gets down to the level of the character where I feel like, gosh, you know how we talked about empathy earlier and building characters so that you build them from the inside out. So they're people that you grow to care about and they have real interior lives that are conveyed on the page. I feel like if a movie went and just totally made you know, like it was almost like they got a brain transplant, the character, you know what I mean? Like, I think that would be really annoying and troubling. Yeah. So I think if it gets down to the character level and also just making the characters, I mean, this is a little bit of a digression, but sometimes one of the things my husband says when we're watching the film or something that really annoys me is he goes, I don't want the main character, I don't want to feel like they're dumber than I am. You know what I mean? Like, I want them to be like sharp and thinking things through. And like, you know, I want them to be
a step ahead of me.
I want them to be a step ahead of me. I don't want to be like, oh, that idiot. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I think if you start having that feeling when you're watching, like you just feel betrayed, maybe like that's when I would get annoyed.
Well, it's like the old stereotype, the horror stereotype of like, they always run into the danger. They don't really ever make the right choice, right? They always do something that leads to their demise.
Right, exactly. You're like, no, yeah, exactly. It's sort of when you just see that the gate, they're walking toward this gaping maw, it's gonna just, and without, whistling toward it. But yeah, I totally see what you're saying, and I agree with that. I think when it gets to kind of violating sort of the character as you envision them, maybe I think that would be really off-putting personally.
I mean, Jodie Foster refused to come back for the sequel to Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal, for that reason. She felt that what they had written for her character, which kind of it implies almost a sympathy for Hannibal, almost a pseudo attraction maybe to him, that she just felt that Clarice would have never done. The one that she portrayed was disgusted by this guy. Fascinated. I mean, just from a professional standpoint, as this FBI, up and coming FBI agent who's working perhaps the most dangerous case of her career, right? I mean, she's like fresh out of academy, if I recall. But she is also disgusted by him. I mean, he eats people. He eats his victims. So the thought of sort of having potentially romantic feelings, or that being implied subtly.
Oh, that's awful. I don't blame her. I would have run in the other direction. And, the character in that, is it Clarice Starling? I can't remember her name.
Clarice, yeah. Starling, yeah.
Just talk about a sharp character who you feel like she's put off by him, but she's able to kind of tuck that under to face him and really be like, I totally agree with Jodie Foster. I mean, that would be such a violation of that sharp character.
It was. I mean, the person that they got to play Clarice for Hannibal, she was okay. I mean, I think if we would have started with her, it would have been fine. I mean, but Jodie Foster, let's face it, is such a brilliant actor that it would be, you can't really follow that act the same way.
No.
And it did. It didn't. I don't think the chemistry between Anthony Hopkins. I don't remember. I mean, that's how bad it is. I almost feel bad, but I don't remember who the actress was for Hannibal. But she wasn't. She couldn't live up to Jodie Foster, and the chemistry between Hannibal and her was not the same. So it felt like a very different Clarice. It should have been another character altogether, I think. Honestly.
Yeah, that might have been a better choice, because it just seems like I think I would be really like. Yeah, just like, oh, what happened to the sharp character that I met in the first, episode, or the first movie, for sure.
Yeah, it's like, I don't think she would have felt empathy for Hannibal. I just don't. And the scenarios in Hannibal were much more severe and horrific, if you can imagine. I don't know if you've seen it, but Silence of the Lambs, was pretty graphic, particularly for the time, and it was done in a very, well, it was just a very dark kind of, suspenseful law enforcement horror kind of show. It kind of crossed a lot of genres, honestly, which made it so great and brilliant. But Hannibal was even more graphic and even more disgustingly horrific, and so. Of course, Anthony Hopkins does a great job. He pulls it off brilliantly, but it's not the same. It's because, again, they made choices that change the character, and I think Jodie would have done it. Honestly, I think she planned to do it, but not under those conditions. So I respect her for that. Because
me too.
Yeah, and I imagine as a writer. I'm looking at it from the writer's point of view too, how that could feel like a betrayal to you, because you must feel a sort of parental kind of care of your stories, don't you? I mean, as a writer, don't you feel almost as though, in much the same way that a parent creates a child, and cares for that child, nurtures that child, cultivates that child, that an author does that very much for their stories and the characters that they put in them.
Yeah, I think there's definitely truth that. I mean, it's something that happens when I always get a little sad when I finish a book. I mean, part of me, I feel like, oh, gosh, I'm glad to like be moving on and so forth. But I really, there's definitely a real sadness of like, I feel like I've been in this world with spending time with these characters and I've, grown to really care about. And I feel kind of, there's a little bit of a mourning period. Yeah, you definitely feel that way, or I feel that way about it. And I wonder if, maybe filmmakers feel the same way too, or act. I don't know. It's interesting. I've never done acting but I wonder if like, if you're really embodying a character too, you feel like you mourn it all when you're parting ways with that character too,
Yeah. I think it probably has a lot to do with how serious you are about what you're creating, because there's clearly, there are writers that just pump out novels because it's just they're printing money for themselves. They're not really as invested in it. They're just putting out stories. The paperbacks that you used to find at the grocery store,
Louis L'Amour's.
Yeah. I mean, these weren't good stories. This wasn't really, I wouldn't call it literature, what I mean? But, it was maybe good money makers because, you have the old ladies that would go in and buy the smut novels and stuff like that.
You still got to write it. I mean, you still got to write it.
Well,
it
these
might
days,
be Mills and Boon, but someone's had to sit. Well, I suppose you can do it with AI.
You can do it with AI now, right?
Have to sit down with them, get it out.
What do you think of that?
I don't know. I don't dismiss them. I don't dismiss even crap novels.
Well,
someone still had to do it.
Someone still had to do the work. That's true. That is true. But they are one dimensional when you read them. They're not. You're not talking about like some kind of very
formulaic.
Yes, there's formulaic, and it touches on all of the various elements they want to put in there. But it's not necessarily a work of art in the way that a good story would be. But Beth, what do you think of AI? I mean, as a creator, as a true content creator, somebody that actually creates something. What do you think of AI kind of like infringing upon your space? Are you worried about it, or do you think it'll never really achieve the same kind of ability?
Yeah, it's so hard to say, isn't it? I mean, I feel like I feel like it is with us. There's no turning back. So I feel like as a writer, okay, new reality, kind of dealing with that. I think maybe, what you were saying about very formulaic kind of books where maybe AI will be more readily able to, turn those kind of books out. In terms of literature kind of books, who knows? I have no idea. I don't think it will deter me at all as a writer because I feel like every book that I go into is a new adventure for me and my brain. And AI can do whatever AI is doing, and I'm going to be writing my books and having my own little adventures. But I will say the one thing I have used AI for is sometimes with marketing stuff with my books, like I'll say, I need to like write a synopsis of it, and I'll speak a synopsis into an AI tool and it'll spit something out with some good lines.
Yeah.
So things like that.
I think that's
like
the way
marketing.
to use it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there's real places where it's time saving, and I think on some of that kind of workaday stuff that you have to do when you're doing marketing for your books, I think that it can help with that. But in terms of me using it as part of my creative, like my fiction writing, I just don't. I think that I wouldn't want to outsource something that, as hard as it is for me, is like so rewarding and so enriching. Like I just can't imagine me personally.
Not for you.
I mean, we've been encouraged. In my day job, we've been encouraged to we've got a version of AI that we're trialing out. And we're encouraged to use it as an assistant, basically, which I'm all for that. I think, like you said, there's lots of perfunctory tasks that really it's not worth wasting your time on.
Yep.
Now, I accept that AI is going to get better and better and better, but I still, I know the staff that use AI to write things, and I know it's not good enough. And I think, I mean, I have a deep theological conviction on this anyway. Human beings are made in the image and likeness of God, so they're made by a creator to be creative, and I firmly believe that is unique to the human species. And so, although machines can imitate that, can mimic that, can regurgitate that, can put it together in ways that are really clever. I don't believe it can chime with, essentially, the person reading it is a human being. And therefore, in a way, AI might be so clever, it doesn't connect.
Well, it can't create the human experience because it's never had one.
It doesn't understand the human heart.
Right.
And that's the gap. Well, and that's the gap, by the way, where God is. That's my evangelism. That thing you can't put your finger on, that is God, or that is the experience of God in time and space and in your life. And so I'm not threatened by AI in the sense that it will destroy artists. It might destroy the world, but it won't destroy art.
But not the artists. As long as we can find a good planet for them, they'll be okay. I was just thinking, it's like, you talk about the human experience. It's kind of interesting because, I mean, definitely all storytelling finds its foundation, its fundamentals in the human experience. I mean, otherwise, what do you really have, right? What story do you have if it's not built upon what we can relate to? But, right now, AI is basically just an intangible on a computer screen. That could, I guess, potentially change, theoretically anyway, when we actually have robots that have the ability of the five senses combined with something like a ChatGPT engine to interact with the world as an individual. That could, I would imagine, if it has learning ability, memory ability, and the ability to reason, at least to the degree that AI can, combined with five senses, could shape or develop potentially an artificial consciousness. And that's what we're really worried. That's what I think people are really worried about. AI is not the problem. Artificial intelligence is not the problem, because intelligence is not the problem. What's the problem is, will it ever generate artificial consciousness? Because that's where the real creative faculties are. That's where the humanness is, I think.
That can be your next horror book.
Yeah, there you go, Beth. We just gave you a good story to stay. Yeah. I mean, honestly, when they've already done ones that were similar. I mean, obviously the Terminator is one. The Matrix, right. Yeah, Matrix is another one. Probably a better one, honestly. iRobot, yeah. And then there was, I remember the one with the kid from we talk about stories, good stories. M. Night Shyamalan's
anything he does.
The I See Dead People one. What was that called?
Sixth Sense.
Sixth Sense. Thank you. Sixth Sense. The kid in that, whose name escapes me also, he was in an AI. He was like a child that you could purchase. He was a robot, but he looked like a real boy. And it was kind of a disturbing film, as I recall. So, I wonder if which I do. I mean, it's not a matter of if. We are very quickly approaching the point of technology where manifesting something like that's going to happen. We're going to all have our own little C-3POs, cleaning our house and maybe even cooking our meals. Some are estimating that within 10 years, this is going to be a possibility. Obviously, these things are going to be too expensive, but there'll probably be things you can rent. So like you want one of these bots that cleans your house, cooks your meals, runs the home when you're gone. You pay $400 a month. You get this, several $100,000 machine that, comes in and does this and lives with you and interacts with you, and you can talk to it, and it basically having a robot butler. But it will have all the senses of a human being, and then the ability to create artificial logic and intelligence. So would that create artificial consciousness? And what is that like? I mean, honestly, Star Trek dealt with this with Data. Were you a fan of Star Trek, Beth?
It's funny. My brothers watched it, so every now and then I would kind of spy on it, but I was not a dedicated Trekkie by any stretch of the means. But the topic, everything you talk about fascinates me along those lines about, consciousness and even the morality. Like, what are we? I mean, I'm the kind of person, like, I kind of like anthropomorphize everything. Like, I talk to my car and I have feelings if my car gets dented. I'm like, so I feel like if there were these robotic intelligences, I would feel like, when do we feel like we feel ethically bound to them too. Like, you know, what's the morality of when we create a consciousness and how we treat these robotic creatures and right?
The reason I bring up Star Trek along the lines of what you just said is that one thing that Star Trek did very well from a storytelling vantage point, I'm just looking at it strictly from storytelling, right? Whether it was just the words on a page or what they actually produced for the show, they did a remarkably good job, particularly not today. Now it's just all lasers and spaceships blowing up, and it's all just like it's action, but no substance. Before, during Star Trek's golden age, from which I would argue
before it went Marvel,
before it went Marvel, I would say from the 80s.
They're not stories; they're just garbage.
80s and 90s was Star Trek's golden age, in my opinion. They dealt with very sophisticated ethical situations that the future could bring about. And what's eerily striking about it is that I always thought when I was a kid watching it, it was so cool that you could talk to the computer and it was just like, it would just tell you whatever you needed to know and it would get you that information, do these things. And how cool would that be? How cool would that be to have, be able to say, hey, computer, do this, and this. And then it tells you and it does it. And now, we're there. We're actually at that point. So much of Star Trek's technology has become real that now so much of Star Trek's ethical dilemmas that technology presented is something we're actually going to face in our lifetime. So one of the things they dealt with was the artificial life form, the android Data, which is a big popular character on the Next Generation of Star Trek. That was the one that ran in the 80s predominantly. It finished in the early 90s, but it ran from, I don't know, it was 87 to 94, I think.
It was the best series of Star Trek.
Deep Space is really good too. Deep Space is really good. They're all good in their own way, but Next Generation dealt with.
I am a Trekkie.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You gotta be. But the Data is one of these stories focuses on whether or not he's the property of Starfleet, or is he, because he's a lieutenant commander in Starfleet. So he went through academy and he was able to he does everything that they can do, even much better, because he's got a positronic brain. He's able to process things at super speeds and everything else. He's kind of indestructible. Largely, he can get damaged and repaired, where most people would die in those scenarios. So he's got his benefits to having him, but Starfleet wants to study him because he's the only one of his kind. No one knows how the person who created him was able to make him. And they want to study him so that they can build more of these, so that every starship in Starfleet can have their own android officer that can help with those kinds of things that the Enterprise enjoys by having Data involved. And so one of the stories is about whether or not he's the property of Starfleet, or is he his own person. And so it goes to court essentially, and the ruling is that he is a sentient life form, not organic, but sentient and living. So it begs the question, if we can get to that level of sophistication of Data, and all the evidence is suggesting that we are very much on track within our lifetime to see that we will see maybe something better than Data.
I remember that episode, and I think, and what's interesting about that is the only people who could make that judgment were human beings. Data himself can't make that judgment. And so I think that's just a really intriguing suspension. Well, where you have this debate about whether someone's sentient or not, and actually, whether he's a life form in his own being as opposed to being property, and yet the only people that could make that decision are the non inorganic life forms. Like it's just an interesting tension.
A very interesting tension, and it shows the power of writing and fiction and being able to explore ideas in a realistic way. That
we're giving Beth some ideas now.
Yeah, I'm telling you. So I don't know, Beth. Do you ever? You don't just write horror. So you're more diversified of a writer than just I guess, a one-trick pony as some people might be.
Sci-fi and horror connected, Alien.
I mean,
yeah.
my gosh, but I mean, what I like sci-fi and horror because it allows us to explore the possibilities of what if without, when we can't, like the possibilities of it's fun. It's like riding a roller coaster. Like I was saying before, what makes a roller coaster fun is the fear that you feel, even though you can't, you're not going to get hurt. I mean, unless something happens with the ride. But that's what's thrilling about it, is that your brain thinks you could get hurt, and that's good enough for your brain to get the adrenaline rush. So with storytelling, what other I guess genres have you touched in, and how does that compare to what you've done with this horror story?
Yeah, I mean, I think like probably, I mean, this is such a, I almost hate to use this term, but like the genre that I say that I've written in previous is literary fiction, in the sense that it's more of like very character driven, and it's not a genre. So
Okay.
it's not any particular genre, but it's like, to give you an example, my novel In This Ground was about a grave digger, and he used to be an indie rocker, and his career took a real slide after the band's lead singer died, and the grave digger always felt really guilty for the singer's death, and so he ends up following his dad into working at the cemetery, and so there's this tension between him getting back into music and rediscovering that, and also intersecting with all the stories in the cemetery. Like there's a lot of people who are partying there, or they're like grieving, and so it's literary fiction in the sense that there's no genre. I mean, it wasn't a mystery story or a ghost story or a thriller or anything like that. But I did write a suspense book that had a little bit of thriller elements to it, because I wanted to try that. But mostly, I feel like for me, I just I kind of get a little idea about something that I've always been fascinated with graveyards and what's going on, all the stuff that goes on there, which I spent time with the gravedigger one time, and he told me all the crazy stuff that happens, and I thought, I just have to write a novel about this. So It is whatever kind of thing interests me, and how I can get interesting characters in that situation and kind of explore it that way. So
Yeah.
And also things that aren't that familiar to other people. I mean, I've spent an inordinate amount of time in graveyards because I was a parish priest for a long time. And
sure, yeah.
Before that, I was a policeman, and so we're the weird ones that actually spend. I mean, it sounds. I don't mean this in any morbid way, but I always preferred funerals to weddings. Because you can actually have real conversations at funerals, and graveyards are places where you can't escape your own mortality, and so I think that's where they're so interesting. But so I can understand the draw to that and why people would be interested in reading about that, because most people don't really spend much time there. And the way we deal with death in postmodern culture is really deeply unhealthy in the West. I mean, we really try to avoid it altogether. Let's have a celebration of life and put them in the hearse, and off they'll go to be cremated somewhere, and I'll just get a pot of ashes later. Yeah. And I think that's that disconnection's really unhealthy. That's not me being opposed to cremation, just for the record, but the idea that you wouldn't see it through, is I think a real shame. I mean, I'm not judging people for it. I'm just saying that I think they're missing out on a painful but important process and experience. And so it's no mystery to me why people are fascinated by graveyards.
Those kinds of stories and the stories that include them. Well, Beth, we're at the end of the show, so I'd like to give a couple minutes here for you to, I guess, tell the audience anything that you want. I mean, anything up and coming that you're working on that you'd like to share, or, how people can get in contact with you, if you're a publisher, anything that you'd like to share. Yeah,
well, everything that I've done, and different like blog posts, everything else is on my website, which is bethcastrodale.com. It has all my stuff from my books, and my musings of various sorts are up there. And so that's probably the best way to get in touch with me and or find out what's going on with me. But I'm so grateful to be on the show. It was such a pleasure, and great questions, and I really enjoyed our conversation. So
Feelings very mutual.
It was great to meet you.
It was very great.
Absolutely.
We'd love to have you back on. Maybe when you finish your next work, if you want to come on and talk about it, we'd love to have you back.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great. I'd love that. So I appreciate it. And yeah, just I want to tune back in and, with you guys too, and follow the different topics that it's very much of interest to me. So I'm looking forward to
cover it all. So
we do. And there's hours of it from past archives. So, just go to the channel, Nicolayan TV, on YouTube and just go to our website, esotericcatholic.org, and just click on the Vestiges After Dark link, and it'll take you to all of the archives of past shows. I mean, we have covered every topic that you could possibly imagine on this show, and there's no stop. There's no limit, because there's just so many things that we can discuss. But I want to again thank you for being with us tonight. It was absolutely wonderful. You were fantastic, and we can't wait to have you back on. I also want to thank all of you for listening and tuning in tonight. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, because this kind of stuff fascinates me. Talking about fiction and how it affects people, how it creates realities, how it changes reality. Like we said with Star Trek and technology, and how we're building these things now. Things that we never would have thought possible, things that looked fanciful before are now reality because of fiction. It's more powerful than you think it is. We're not going to be here next week because, it's Holy Week, okay? So that takes precedence, as I said at the beginning of the show. And then we take a week off after that. So there's 2 weeks, no show, but we'll be back in 3 weeks. And that's when we will be covering the subjects of astrology. We'll have a new astrologer here, someone's never been on the show, to talk about what's going on out there in the stars. And maybe you'll learn a little bit something about yourself, and we'll see what she says about Neptune and Aries, okay? But until then, I will see you all out there in the ether. God bless everyone. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Beth, Father Chris, and Brandon. We really appreciate all of you. And to my audience, take care. God bless.